Astonishing Legends Network.
Thanks to our sponsors and Patreon supporters, Astonishing Legends is free to listen to. We appreciate your support of them and us.
If you live in a colder region of the world, then you know that a river in the winter doesn't always look like a river. Frozen or not, it can look like a strangely enticing but nearly impassable liquid highway on a distant planet. Slow on the surface, but deadly strong just below. More kinetic and active than anyone watching from a bridge would be able to see. The Monongahela River, or the Mon as the locals call it, was running at 8 to 10 knots on a January night of 1956. The water was 35 degrees. The air above it, 27. There was no ice on the river that day, but there was ice on its edges, and ice in the rocks along Beck's Run, which will become familiar to you tonight if you're not from the area. There was also ice on the railing of the Homestead High Level Bridge where, just before 4 in the afternoon, drivers heading home from the local mill started to slow down because something in their peripheral vision just wasn't right. A monster was silently descending from the sky, too large to be airborne, too silent to be an airplane, but an airplane was exactly what it was. The B-25 Mitchell came in from the northeast at maybe 50 feet over the bridge, maybe 30, depending on which witness you talk to and how many decades have gone by since then. Both engines were dead and the propellers weren't turning. The plane was gliding. People got out of their cars, and a trucker stopped on River Road. A police officer in a prowler keyed his radio. Nobody yelled, because there was nothing to yell about. The plane was still in the air, and the pilot, whoever he was clearly aiming for the water on purpose. He had his flaps down. He was lined up downstream. He had a plan, such as it was. The splash, when it came, was described by a witness the next morning as a geyser, a column of white froth taller than the bridge itself, hanging in the air for what seemed like forever before collapsing back into the river. The entropy of nature reminded all the people staring that in the end, nature was in charge. 6 men climbed out onto the wings. Some of you might envision the miracle on the Hudson when Captain Sully Sullenberger brought his Airbus A320 down on the river between Manhattan, New York, and New Jersey in 2009. A true miracle of survival, just like this flight. But Sully's plane didn't sink. The pilot of the B-25 was Major William Dotson. He was 33 years old. He'd flown in the Second World War and Korea, and he was, by every account from people who knew him, one of the best pilots in the United States Air Force. He had just performed what aviation textbooks would later describe as a perfect wheels-up water landing. He had saved every single one of his crew from the impact, and in the next 15 minutes, in front of hundreds of people on a bridge and on a riverbank, as well as 3 towboats racing toward him, he was going to lose 2 of them. This is the story of a plane that went into a river just southeast of Pittsburgh in front of everyone, and despite all the crew members on board making it out of the aircraft, the plane itself disappeared beneath the waves in only about 25 feet of water, and was never seen again.
Welcome back to Astonishing Legends. I'm Scott Philbrook, and this is Forrest Burgess.
One of them disappeared in that dirty water less than 50 feet from the men who were trying to get to him. That's what hurts. Assistant Superintendent Lawrence J. Maloney of the Pittsburgh Police, from the Pittsburgh Press, February 1st, 1956.
Join us tonight as we dive into the 70-year search for an airplane that vanished forever in a shallow riverbed.
And we're back.
That we are, folks, and it's good to be back. We're so sorry a new show didn't get published last week, but a close family member of mine had a medical emergency.
Oh, yes, we're very familiar with those now. But he's doing better, right?
Yes, he is. Thank you. And we appreciate your patience during that brief lull. But we're back this week with a new episode of both the main show as well as the Dead Letter Office, which is already posted by the time you've heard this.
Well, I know our listeners have been wishing you and yours well across all of our social media platforms, as have I. And we're all very glad to hear that things have improved.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of you out there who were kind enough to post supportive comments. You're truly the best audience in the business, and we're lucky to have you. A relevant update on our schedule: the show that we canceled will be picked back up later in the year, most likely the fall. After tonight's show, we get into our summer schedule, which is not entirely ironed out, but the next new episode...
Which, are you excited? Because, yeah, I might be.
I am pretty excited, actually. It's been a while since we've done this. The next new episode of the main show, which we'll post on June 13th, we'll be bringing back our very longtime friend, Mr. Richard Haddam, to dissect and discuss one of the most amazing books from his paranormal bookshelf collection of first editions, The Uninvited.
That's right. It was in that very generous and lovely massive gift basket that one holiday season he sneakily dropped off. I remember at your house, he was sneaking behind your car so you wouldn't look out the window to see him. He wanted to be, yes,
right.
delivered
Back when
by...
we used to record over there, yeah.
Yes, perhaps delivered with a bow by ultra-terrestrials. But it was a really tremendous baskets of great books. And this is one of them. And ever since, we've been wanting to cover this one. So I'm pretty excited about this. Also, we haven't talked to Rich in a long time, I think, on the show. That's right. Professionally, if this is any kind of professionalism. But yeah, I'm very excited to hear what he has to say about it, because it is truly a remarkable story. So here's your chance, folks. You know, we usually try to surprise you on upcoming topics. At least I do. Scott likes to announce everything. But it occurred to us that you deserve a chance to read this book before we get to talking about it. So look for this title: The Uninvited, The True Story of Ripperston Farm by Clive Harold.
Yes, we have a link to it in our show notes, connected back to bookshop.org, which supports small local bookstores. And our link allows us to collect a referral fee there as well. Thanks to Rich for introducing us to Bookshop a while back. Yeah,
it was a great lead. And it kind of reminds me, speaking of books, of the book that launched Lord Byron into stardom in his circles, his literary circles, Childe Harold, which I think was about his exploits abroad during a gap year, as they used to say. Well, yeah, so look for that book, folks, called The Uninvited by Clive Harold. There are other books titled The Uninvited, but you want the one by Clive, C-L-I-V-E, Harold, about Ripperston Farm. And get it read by June 13th if you want to be up to speed with our discussion.
Yes, and in the meanwhile, if you don't know Richard Haddam, look through our back catalog for his guest appearances on Astonishing Legends, or better yet, check out his podcast, Richard Haddam's Paranormal Bookshelf, for a fascinating look at his amazing collection of paranormal books, and also a deep dive into his own life and background that led him to become a successful television and film screenwriter and producer.
Yes, his podcast is phenomenal and fantastic, and probably most folks know him as the screenwriter, speaking of, for the Mothman Prophecies, which once again is available to stream for free on Amazon Prime. Now, you have to, of course, subscribe to Amazon Prime, but you don't have to pay another rental fee to watch it. So it's one of my go-to late night movies. Yeah.
So kind.
No, but just like there's such a vibe to it. Like I could just watch bits of it, parts of it, especially late at night though. It's so, when he shows up at the motel and it's got that.
Yeah, it's the best.
Yeah. Great direction too. But anyway, yeah, it's not just the film adaptation of John Keel's Mothman Prophecies, but again, his own TV series called Miracles, excellent as well. Yeah. And his work on Grimm, Second Chance, The Gates, Dead Zone, and one of Scott's favorites, and mine, Titans.
Yes, Titans was so great. I wish it was still in production.
I know. Really
enjoyed that. So, all right. Well, let's get into tonight's story. It's hard to believe it's 70 years old this year. That's part of what makes it an astonishing legend, because after all this time, there's still no resolution on this one.
No solid one. And, when I first heard about it, we've been talking about this on occasion throughout our podcasting, foray into the unknown. And it's kind of fascinated me because I'm not completely convinced. I thought there might be, quote unquote, mundane explanation for this, but a fascinating environmental one of sorts, or just something very strange happening because the whole thing went missing, never to be found again. I thought, okay, I want to get to the bottom of this because I do want to know what are the unanswered questions to it. Or was it some strange, interesting process like saponification, where the water's cold enough, their body is interred in the depths, like they will turn into soap? Is it something strange like that? Some kind of weird chemical process? So, on the surface, it seems like a pretty simple story. Plane comes down, it ditches in front of tons of witnesses in shallow, water, but a strong river. And everyone survives the landing, although, sadly, too, they don't make it to shore, which is, gut-wrenching that you're that close.
You just reminded me of episode 283 of our show, the SS Kamloops and Old
That's
Whitey,
right.
speaking of saponification.
I don't know
area.
if he got... if he got soapy, but he's apparently still floating around.
Well, we talked about it on that
We did
episode,
talk about that, because something is...
He's still there.
A combination of very cold water, but also low oxygen levels.
Yeah.
So you stay fairly much preserved. But is it something like that? But here's a strange, one of the initial things about this case here, about Monongahela bomber, is that it sinks, but is only sinking in 20 to 30 feet of water. And for a river, it's not that deep. It should have been found, but it just never was.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into it. So this happened on a Tuesday afternoon. It was late January of 1956. At this time, Pittsburgh was still the steel city, was like the center of that in the United States. The mills there were running around the clock, and the J&L plant, which you'll hear a lot about tonight, at Hazelwood, outside of Pittsburgh, is one of them, with smoke billowing out across the south bank of the Monongahela, or the Mon, as the locals call it. The river itself is in the condition it stayed in for most of the 20th century, which is to say, it's not really water anymore. It's water plus, it's decades of acid mine drainage from West Virginia coal fields, plus every mill upstream has been pouring into it since before any of these guys were even born in the story tonight.
So it's perfect for swimming, fishing, and drinking straight from the source.
It's not a place you want to take a dip.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's also January, so if you... If you fall in and the chemicals don't get you, the cold will. And you've only got a few minutes to, as we all know, survive cold water like that. But you do have a chance.
That's like that one time I heard that story a long time ago on TV about the guy who lived. He survived this, but he jumped out of a plane and then realized he had forgotten his parachute. And because he had a bunch of camera gear, I think.
Oh.
Yeah. And when he tells the story at the end, somehow he lived, but I remember him hit the quote. It's one of those quotes that I just love where he's just like, as I was falling and realized that I didn't have my parachute, the first thing I thought was, this is not a survivable scenario, which is a lot like what falling in this river sounds like, between the cold and the poison and the whatever else.
Like Buster Scruggs says in the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, like, well, that ain't good, when he gets shot in the head.
That ain't good. Yes.
Well, this ain't good. But here's the paradox or the dilemma of really cold water. If it's super cold, that actually might preserve you. And so there's all these scenarios we know, because this will feature in a couple of people falling in. There are stories where it slowed down your heart rate so much that it actually preserved you, because the thing you don't want is brain damage, obviously. But in the case of the Titanic, remember, Jack and Rose and Jack didn't do so well being dunked in the water. However, the story of the chef or the baker, remember, he was the guy that clung to the railing, and they have a nod to him in the movie, but he drank so much alcohol, which is not normally suggested or recommended, but it did something to his blood flow that, it basically has your blood, I think, rise to the surface of your skin, but he was so drunk that it actually saved him. I just can't imagine the hangover he would have had.
Yeah. On this day, the water was 35 degrees. The air was 27.
Ouch.
It's rush hour. The Homestead High Level Bridge is full of cars heading home from the South Hills and from the mill. And that bridge, which was built in 1937, just under 20 years earlier, was the first bridge ever built using something called a Weikert Truss. And the city actually later renamed it for people that live near there now. It's now called the Homestead Grays Bridge. They renamed it in 2003. But in 1956, everyone was calling it the high level.
Please explain to us, one, what a Weikert truss is. Also, is there
Yeah.
any connection or similarities or parallels to the Silver Bridge in Point Pleasant?
Well, that's what I was going to say. So with the Weikert Bridge, it's a Pittsburgh thing. This was patented in 1930 by a local civil engineer named Edward Weikert, Wichert. Forgive me, Weikert family, if I'm saying his last name wrong. The trick to this, from a design standpoint, is it has a hinged quadrilateral section that sits over each support pier, which looks kind of like a kite or a rhombus if you're looking at it from the side. And that breaks up the structural load in a way that lets you calculate the forces in each span independently, which sounds boring until you remember this is before computers.
Yeah.
Weikert, I think, passed away in the 1940s or 50s maybe, but they didn't have the luxury that we have today of all these computers to figure this kind of stuff out. But the bridge it's hard to describe visually, but if you see one, it's recognizable. If you look this bridge up, you'll be like, oh yeah, I've seen those before. However, there's not a lot of them. But before the Weikert, designing a continuous truss bridge meant doing the math by hand, and the math was brutal. So the breakthrough was that Weikert's design made it a lot simpler. And the Homestead High Level was the first one of these ever built.
Yeah, talking about it's all math and it's all done with a slide rule. And if you kids don't know what that is, look that up because I'm amazed that you could fashion a measurement device like a slide rule and have it be accurate because you have to manufacture the slide rule with tremendous accuracy to be accurate.
Yeah.
Anyway,
right.
So talking about the Homestead High Bridge, how many are there of this type of design out there?
Well, there was maybe 10 or so ever built, mostly in Pennsylvania and Maryland, and Pittsburgh has 2 of the survivors. It's a rare bridge.
Folks, as Scott said, if you look this up and look at a picture, you'll recognize the design.
Yes.
Even if you don't have one in your town, it's kind of like V's or W's trussing on the side of it with a network over the top, and it looks very sturdy. And
it kind of reminds me of that thing that artist makes that walks on the beach just from the wind. There's some shapes that are similar.
What do you mean?
You know, the wooden thing, it's like wood and like the wind just barely blows it and it walks. You haven't seen those? It's an artist that builds
I think
them.
so. Yeah.
There's similar like structural elements.
Right. It's a lot of classic design. But on this Tuesday that we're talking about here, there are steel workers crossing it on their way home. Boy, this is really sounding like Point Pleasant. And pickup trucks on the river road below, which I think nowadays it's called Carson Street.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that was hard to source, but if you're looking on a map where Beck's Run ends at the Mon, I'll say, today it ends at Carson Street, and that's the right spot for where a lot of witnesses were. I mean, there were witnesses everywhere.
Yeah. Benefiting really any listeners that we have that might be like, oh, I know where that is. Yeah, exactly. And no one else really does or cares. But what I do appreciate is that we'll be looking through our Facebook group, and it's like, I live right there.
I'm right there. I'm right at it.
Yeah, wherever, how obscure it is, someone out there will often know exactly what we're talking about. So anyway, the Coast Guard's got boats on the river here, and 3 of the J&L's own towboats, the mill that we talked about here, they're working the barges between Rutherglen Street, I believe, and the coal docks. And again, Rutherglen Street is no longer around. Well, the name isn't, but it's replaced by an updated development. Now, keep in mind here, we're talking about 1956, but the main point we're talking about here is the stretch of the Mon from the Homestead Bridge down to Glenwood is, at least on this particular afternoon, one of the most heavily watched 2 miles of waterway in the U.S.
Yeah, which is important.
That's right, exactly. Yeah, because what happens in the next 20 minutes is going to be witnessed by hundreds of people in real time, and the Air Force and the Coast Guard and the Army Corps of Engineers are still going to spend 2 weeks trying to find a 13-ton airplane in just 25 to 30 feet of water. Simple, right? I'm no wine expert by any stretch, but I do really enjoy a nice glass of wine now and again, which is why I've kept my subscription to First Leaf going. Now, don't get me wrong, I would love to be an expert on wines, mostly to impress my friends and the occasional server. But seriously, I do find it comforting when you're out with friends at a nice dinner and someone knows enough to know what wine to pair with what dish. as long as you're not a snob about it.
Some knowledge is good, and you don't want to make a blunder like when Sean Connery suspected something fishy when Robert Shaw ordered that red wine with fish in From Russia with Love.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Well, what a barbarian. Anyway, so let First Leaf be your personal sommelier. The wines are always top-notch, so I love letting them surprise me with every delivery. And then for the simple wine knowledge, they send a pamphlet with each shipment that explains what to expect with your bottles. So, like what food it pairs well with and the tasting notes. Although sometimes I admit I just like the fun names and the labels, like the South African wine they just sent, the Companies of Beasts. That's a medieval spelling there. Yes, always a delicious surprise.
You barbarian.
Oh,
well,
they are fun. Come on.
Yeah, no, you're right. I love the easy to follow tasting notes that come with every box. So no matter what you're having for dinner, like an amuse-bouche or hors d'oeuvre, you know exactly what to pour. It's like having a cheat sheet that actually makes it look like you know what you're doing.
Yeah, that's right. And the ordering and receiving couldn't be easier. You just answer a quick quiz about your preferences, and First Leaf will send you their personalized selections you're guaranteed to love, and on the schedule you want. Like if you need some wine by the weekend, you simply adjust the timing, or, going on vacation, just skip that shipment. You're in control, and First Leaf takes all the guesswork out of it.
First Leaf gives you access to award-winning bottles because they work directly with wineries, so you get quality vino you can't always find at your local store, and at prices well below retail. And who doesn't love that?
Yeah, and let's say in the rare occasion that you get a bottle that doesn't quite hit the spot, well, First Leaf has a 100% satisfaction guarantee, so they'll make it right. Try doing that at your local wine merchant and see what they say.
I doubt they'll want to make it right. So stop settling for wines that don't quite hit the mark. Head to tryfirstleaf.com/AL to sign up, and you'll get 50% off your first box plus free shipping for an entire year.
Wow, that's tryfirstleaf.com/AL.
Tryfirstleaf.com/AL. You ever get that feeling like back in the day, instead of learning to skateboard, you wish you'd been learning to write code?
Yeah, I did try to learn to skateboard, but then I learned how to drive. Anyway, but yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's like if we understood Bitcoin good enough to buy it when our friend Case was like, yeah, you should get this. It's only 25 cents a coin.
Yeah, I think about that one a lot.
I know, we both do.
I guess you could call us the FOMO generation.
Yeah,
but don't miss out on this, protecting your family's future. About the same per month as a streaming service is these days.
Yeah, we're talking about life insurance, and if you're new to it, you're not alone. Most folks don't have any, or their policy disappears when they change jobs.
Thankfully, there's SelectQuote. For over 40 years, SelectQuote has helped more than 2 million Americans understand their options and get the coverage they need. Over $700 billion in coverage and counting.
SelectQuote takes the guesswork out of finding life insurance. You don't have to sort through dozens of confusing options on your own.
Their mission is simple: to find you the right insurance policy at the best price.
A licensed agent compares plans from top-rated carriers to find a policy that fits your health, your lifestyle, and your budget. And they work for you for free.
And SelectQuote works with providers who offer same-day coverage, up to $2 million worth, with no medical exam required.
Yeah, you got something going on health-wise? Well, SelectQuote partners with companies that offer policies for people with conditions like high blood pressure, diabetes, or heart disease.
Head to SelectQuote.com, and a licensed insurance agent will call you right away with the right policy for your life and your budget.
Life insurance is never cheaper than it is today. SelectQuote. They shop, you save.
Get the right life insurance for you for less and save more than 50% at SelectQuote.com/AL.
Save more than 50% on term life insurance at SelectQuote.com/AL today to get started.
That's SelectQuote.com/AL.
This is Marco Acevedo in Evanston, Illinois. And when I'm not terrifying my kids with bedtime campfire tales in the tent in our living room, I'm listening to Astonishing Legends. Let's get back to the show.
Let's talk about the plane here. A lot of people hear World War II bomber and B-25, and they think this is a monster plane if you're not an aircraft aficionado, but this is not a B-29.
Right.
Yeah,
we're talking to people of our generation and no younger, I think, than any plane aficionados out there. But I think both you and I, and your son now, which is encouraging. is into aircraft like that, and especially military. And so, yeah, you got to keep in mind, we have other notes here coming down about the B-25, but
Yeah.
it's the nickname was the Mitchell B-25
Yes.
bomber. We're going to speak a little bit of that because there's a connection to a past show we did. I'm not sure if you realize that yet.
Yeah.
But anyway, the B-29 that people, if you've seen the Enola Gay, okay, that's the
Yes.
B-29 Super Fortress. It has 4 engines. Now I'm talking out of, this is Roma data, R-O-M-A.
Yeah.
The Junkers, the German plane that I think they were trying to develop, I think that had maybe 8 engines or 6 engines in it, maybe 8, but like it was a massive plane the Germans were working on. And the theory was that, and this ties in with the Nazi Bell discussion, is that they were trying to build a plane, it is believable to go, that would go from Europe to New York to drop a bomb, an atomic bomb on New York. And that was in the works. But anyway, that was the theory, is that their Junkers was the biggest plane, lots of engines. The B-29 was the one that dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 60 tons or more loaded down.
Yeah.
And the B-25 was classified as a medium range bomber. So that's a twin engine plane. It's about half the size of the B-29. The one in particular here we're talking about is a TB-25N Mitchell variation, serial number 44-29125. No one's going to need that. Somebody will.
Yeah, these planes loaded only weigh about 13 tons. And also the other claim to fame with this plane is these were part of the infamous Doolittle raid.
Yeah, right. And even if you watch the movie Pearl Harbor, Michael Bay's Pearl Harbor, my point being is that there's a whole section of the film where if you want to see a movie about Pearl Harbor that critics and historians say is super accurate, actually, about the timeline and what happened, is Tora, Tora, Tora. Great cast.
Yeah.
But that one
I've
is
never
shown.
seen that.
Oh,
I
you
know
got
it because it's a famous movie, but I have never seen it.
Not only that,
I'm writing it down right now.
Yeah,
actually.
historians will say like that's very accurate, which is a rarity for Hollywood films. But Pearl Harbor, at least they show a scene with Alec Baldwin. I think he's Billy Mitchell in the film, where they show how they did the raid because they had to pare down those planes. There was
Doolittle raid.
Yeah, the Doolittle raids, right? So
Yeah.
that's the Tokyo type of plane here.
Right.
From the Doolittle raid, April 1942. This is 4 months after Pearl Harbor. And Jimmy Doolittle, who's also got a very storied career, quite famous, he takes 16 B-25s off the deck of the USS Hornet, and he bombs the Japanese home islands with a lot of incendiary bombs, specifically targeting their manufacturing and industry soft targets. I'm saying soft targets because they didn't have any clue or suspicion or inkling that we could make it that far. That would be impossible.
Right.
They wouldn't dare do that. Well, guess what? If you dare Americans to do that, that's exactly what they're going to do.
Yeah.
They're going to take the hard way because you're going to be shocked when they come knocking on your door here. The B-25 becomes one of the most produced American bombers of the war, which is a testament to how well it was designed and its usefulness.
Yeah.
Roughly 10,000 of them get built. By 1956, when this legend we're talking about takes place, it's one of the workhorses of the U.S. Army Air Corps and then later the Air Force. But the fighting model by this point is gone. So what is left is the trainer variant, and that is the TB-25N, which is the version that gets converted for navigator training and light cargo work after the war ends. Now, the other thing I was going to tell you about, so yeah, as you'll know from the story, what they did is that they have to launch. These are not meant to be launched off an aircraft carrier. Okay,
Right.
these are land-based, land runway, takeoff, landing type of aircraft. They're not meant to be catapulted, and they had to be totally stripped down. They only had enough. You have to do a trade-off between amount of bombs and amount of fuel you can do. It was a one-way trip, and the idea was that it was all volunteers because they knew they were not coming back, and if they did, it would be a hard slog to get back to the homeland. So a lot of them landed in China. They crashed. One guy, he's telling his story, I saw in a clip, landed in let's say a human manure field. Because of all places to land, I had to land there. Like he was just covered and the farmers come out like they're freaking out.
Oh, yeah.
But he made it back. But we wanted to show that we could touch them. And as the one Admiral Yamamoto, I think, said in Tora, 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 is that I think all we have done is awaken a sleeping giant.
Yeah.
Pardon me, but that was just off the top of my head. It may not have been that general, but it was one of the
Well,
admirals.
no, it's interesting, and now I do want to see that film. Well, coming back to
Yeah.
the B-25, the plane at the center of this story, and the Doolittle raid plane, and all of that. This plane is about 67 feet across the wings, 53 feet long, 16 feet tall at the tail. Keep that in mind. I thought that was interesting because if the river supposedly where it went down was 25 to 35
You're halfway
feet
there.
deep.
Yeah.
If the tail is intact, that's maybe 20 feet down, maybe so, or 15, who knows? Anyway, loaded weight around 13 tons, as I said a minute ago. And this matters for later. This particular aircraft, 44-29125, was actually scheduled to be retired and decommissioned within about 18 months of when this happened. It's an older airplane. And in theory, it's not carrying anything strategic, although we'll be talking about that in the back.
Well, as far as we know, right?
In this case, they're saying it's just kind of doing rudimentary work.
It's flying cargo and errands and this and that. The other thing I was going to mention on top of that is the other. Now, I don't know if he was flying the B-25, but if you recall our episode on the Mad Doctor of Spokane, the rich guy who was the Mad Doctor would throw these super lavish parties, and people don't realize this, but a lot of celebrities of the time would come through Spokane and the areas because it's a great recreational region. So there's a lot of water sport activities, lakes to go fishing and hunting and all that, and so they would come up to hang out. It was a resort area of sorts. And so at this lavish party that Billy Mitchell, I believe, was apparently at, in the middle of the party, he's like, okay, hold your drinks.
Mitchell of the Mitchell bomber.
That's right.
Just for people who are, keeping up here.
It might have been literally a hold my beer, watch this. So he takes off from the party and says, I'll be right back. And he comes back. He goes to the airfield. It might have been Geiger, but he comes back in a military aircraft, I believe, and dive bombs and buzzes the house. Just for yucks, just for like fun. Lands, comes back to the party. How'd you like that? So he was a character.
Yeah, that was episode 213, The Mad Doctor of Spokane. Very, very interesting story. We had a lot of fun with that. And I was looking back, I was like, did we confirm what kind of aircraft he overflew the party in? And we weren't sure. We found some pictures of him with some of his planes that he had, but we don't know which one he flew over. I don't think it was a Mitchell, probably, since that was government issue, but who knows? He is Mitchell, so maybe he
gets a free one.
Yeah, he gets a free one.
Right,
but
from the manufacturer.
Anyway, in this case, what they're telling us, the official story is that this is basically a grocery getter, as motorheads like to say. It's for training. The mission was a parts pickup. They were supposed to fly from Nellis Air Force Base outside of Vegas to Olmsted Air Force Base near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Pick up a load of aircraft parts or a UFO. We'll talk about that later. And on the way back, drop 2 passengers at Andrews Air Force Base outside D.C. That's it. That's the whole flight. The crew going east, at least before they turned west to ditch.
Why don't you go through the list here of who we have, who are the souls on board?
All right. So there were 6 souls on board for the leg that mattered. Major William L. Dotson, D-O-T-S-O-N, not Dotson like the car. But who knows? Maybe distantly related.
Oh.
He was the pilot, 33 years old, World War II combat veteran, shot down off the coast of Sicily once, Korea combat veteran, by every account, a really good pilot. Then also we had Captain John F. Jameson, a co-pilot from Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, not too far from where this took place.
Yeah, then we have a third pilot, Steve Tabak.
Yeah, so Captain Steve Tabak. There's 3 pilots, keep that in mind. And Tabak is going to disappear from this story in a minute because he gets off the plane in Detroit. The crew chief, however, was Staff Sergeant Walter Eugene Soocey, S-O-O-C-E-Y. He was 32. In various sources, they're listed as passengers riding along, but also military folks. Captain Gene Ingraham and Master Sergeant Alfred J. Alleman, who was 26, also stationed at Nellis, plus an 18-year-old kid from Philadelphia named Charles Smith, airman 2nd class.
Yeah, 18 years old. And of course, this is the observation from folks my age, just that in eras and generations past, how much they accomplished and how serious the accomplishments were, having gone through World War II at such a young age. And like, what did I do at 33? Nothing.
Yeah.
I was editing commercials. I was like,
yeah, exactly.
I was editing trailers for movies and helping the world. How? Not really, just annoying people with my efforts. And that's it. It's like my grandfather was, I think he was telling me by the time he was 19 or 20, owned his own gas station. And that's the one that you see from Back to the Future where 5 guys run out to check the oil and to clean the windows and fill your tires and full service. He owned a house. He was married. And I think a couple years, when he was 21 or 22, went into World War II. When most guys were 18. You could get in at 17 if you lied, I think, and maybe younger. But he did all that. And I think by 22 or 23, my dad was born. And a lot more than I've done at twice that age. But you can't compare. It's a different time and all that. But anyway, these are accomplished men, even for their young age. And so I don't want you to think like just a bunch of, goofballs at 30, goofing around here. These guys were hardened veterans, some of them, and knew what they were doing. And this route, again, was from Nellis to Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma, where they refueled there. Then they stayed overnight on January 30th. And then the next morning, January 31st, they head for Selfridge Air Force Base just outside of Detroit for the second refueling. And then at Tinker Air Force Base, before they leave, the maintenance crew installs a new right brake assembly and a new left outboard brake assembly on the airplane. And Selfridge has been reporting ice and snow on the runways, and Captain Dotson doesn't want to skid into anything. Just so you know, the technology here on this old 46 Ford I had that was passed down through, that was my grandfather also owned a car years before I was able to even afford one.
That car was 10 years old already when this happened.
It was a Ford, 1946 Ford. And you think like, oh, well, what's the model name? Like, no, that's it. That's the car that Ford made in 1946. Yeah. So it's everywhere. And unfortunately not the convertible that you see in Grease. The collectible movie. One. Yeah, right. It was. We never had the collectible versions of anything, but it had the shocks were airplane shocks, that kind of hinged shocks that you see. So it's still pretty complicated. I want to say the mechanics of this, but again, they've just been through a war. They know how these things function, how to repair them, and as everyone knows, you have to be much more careful with an aircraft because you can't pull over if something goes wrong.
So here's the important thing about having that work done is that it just shows you that the pilot knows the aircraft and he knows the risks on what's a relatively or supposedly relatively mundane mission, and he's thinking ahead about the conditions where he's going.
Yeah, and that's my point here is that every pilot knows every mission is not routine and not mundane in a way. And I remember even when I was in high school, I had a good friend who had his pilot's license, and his family, they owned a plane. A small Piper Cub, but I remember him taking me for a ride late one evening. And I was impressed by just him going through the checklist on the clipboard and checking every part of that aircraft, even for a joyride. And then later realized, I'm thankful he did that. Not just, hey, get in, you want to fly? Exactly. He did let me fly, but he knew what he was doing. That's what I'm saying, is that you have to be serious about this stuff.
That's what you want to see. I'm like, you know what? Take all the time you need.
Yeah. And it's like, what do you have to go around with a clipboard? I said, just trust me.
Let's
just let me
go,
do this.
man.
Yeah. But anyway, this is going by the numbers, paint by numbers. You could say the mission here. They land at Selfridge at 1:13 p.m. in the afternoon Eastern time. They're 3.5 hours at this point from Olmsted, so now they have fuel, and at this point also the weather's manageable.
Yes, and then they make a decision at Selfridge that the Air Force actually spends the rest of the year trying to back calculate.
Oh, back calculate. What do you mean by that?
Just, going back and taking a look at what was this part of the series of things that led to this disaster?
Oh, yes, of course. Yes. Okay. Yeah. I get you with the investigation. Right. And we've been down this road before with Amelia Earhart the night before she and Fred Noonan took off from Papua New Guinea. Every little thing they did, scrutinized on a granular level. And as I was saying, everything is performed at a granular level because you have to if you want to survive. Right. So the great thing about that kind of stuff is that it's charted somewhere.
Yeah. And in their case, in Earhart's case, they supposedly threw out water rescue gear to save weight so their fuel would last longer.
Right.
Which may have played a part in whatever happened to them. And in this case, by the way, this aircraft did not have anything of that type on board either, just for something to note. But anyway, so we're at Selfridge outside of Detroit. It's raining and sleeting. There's a line of military aircraft waiting for the fuel truck, and the wait's going to be 2 to 3 hours. So Tabak, he actually gets off here. He's not on the next leg, like we said earlier. Now there's 6 men on the airplane, and Dotson decides he doesn't particularly want to wait for the fuel truck.
Right. Now, why is this?
Well, because by the gauges, he doesn't need to. Here's the math the Air Force later wrote down in the summary of circumstances, the SOC of the accident report. And this is verbatim, more or less, from the unredacted text. Quote, the fuel remaining was considered adequate for 3 hours of flight, and the next leg of the flight would require only 1 hour and 40 minutes. The decision was made not to refuel the aircraft, end quote. So by the gauges, they've got 3 hours of fuel. The flight to Olmsted is 1 hour 40. That's essentially almost 100% reserve.
Yeah, it's a comfortable margin.
Yeah.
Now, here's the wrinkle, though. The fuel gauges on a B-25 of this vintage era were considered notoriously inaccurate.
Yes, it reminds me of my Austin Healey.
Yes, okay. Well, before you ask you for that, yeah, and you may have run across this yourself, but I have gone through and taken apart a lot of that 46 Ford I was talking about.
Yeah.
One thing is the gas tank, because it'll start to rust on the inside. Now they're coated these days. I think they were minimally back then, or some kind of protection, but not meant to be sitting around in a backyard for 50 years. And they start to flake off. So I took the gas tank out and I had to put a new one from a junkyard in. And the float, because I always wondered this as a kid, like, how do you know how much? I could have just asked my dad and my grandfather, both mechanics. Yeah. But I always wonder, like, how do they know how much gas is in there? Well, there's a very simple switch that has a rod and a round, ends in a round hook of sorts. And essentially there's a cork there. That's right. So it's just measuring the flotation level, or the service level of the gasoline with a floating cork. And of course,
right, like how a toilet works.
Yeah, the cork had rotted, and so it wasn't keeping very good measurement. But yeah, that's how it's gauged, is that there you go. And what about the Austin Healey?
Well, the fuel gauge in the Healey, this has been in my family since it was new in 1964. And that fuel gauge is more of a suggestion, really, or a kind of a guesstimate of, and it bounces around a lot.
Yeah. So that's right.
You just kind of, but on the plus side, you can fill it up with like $8 of gas and it'll drive hundreds of miles. So.
Well, yes, everything's a trade-off. But that's what I was saying, like the bouncing, right now, the sloshing with the float gauge in there is maybe why the needle's bouncing.
Yeah, there you go. And also British. No offense to the Brits, but this car is very British.
Petrol.
So, I don't want to say a whole lot more about it, but I'll tell you that it's positive earth. The positive terminal on the battery is grounded, and the negative terminal is the one that does all the work. It's backwards from literally every other kind of car battery you've ever seen.
Yes, the early British cars were not known for their great electrical harnesses and whatnot.
Yes.
Well, in the case here with the Mitchell B25, the way you actually verified your fuel level on the ground was, get this, somebody climbed up on the wings with a dipstick.
Right, but again, freezing rain.
Yeah. Well, so there's freezing rain, and then there's very cold sleet, but you can access the fuel filler cap there on the wing, and you just dipped it down. And like I said, this is not meant for your convenience. Right. But you want to get an accurate measurement on that.
Yeah, if you're not trusting your gauges or whatever. But so this is the thing. Nobody wants to stand on the wing that day. That's, there's ice. Nobody got out there with the dipstick to do that in the sleet. And also they wanted to get on their way. And so they didn't. And the three pilots, they looked at each other, looked at the gauges, looked at the sleet, and trusted the gauges. Just like I do whenever I take the Austin Healey out for a drive. But I always take my cell phone and stay off the highway.
Right. That Morpheus suggests that too. Stay off the freeways. But that's recommended anyway. But the point here is that there should have been plenty of margin. Like I said, if it's off a few gallons, no big deal, right?
Yeah, this isn't necessarily a reckless decision.
Everyone involved is qualified to make that call. And Captain Dotson alone has been flying combat aircraft since the early 1940s. This is what I was saying. They have tremendous veteran experience here. They've been through the thick of it in the worst conditions. So they take off. They go. And they lift off from Selfridge at 2:43 in the afternoon. Dotson moves to the pilot's seat. He was the co-pilot on the Tinker to Selfridge leg. And Jameson takes the co-pilot seat. Ingraham and Susie are in the forward crew compartment. And then Smith and Alleman are in the rear, and they're flying instrument rules at 7,000 feet on a standard route. Red airway 20, red 65, green 4. You know what those runway that's one thing I really wanted to study and learn.
No, they're not runways; they're routes.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
exactly.
I'm saying in a different thing. I always wanted to understand how the traffic works on an airfield.
Yeah,
here.
I don't know much about it. What I do know, I learned from Microsoft Flight Simulator, and I'm talking like 20 years ago when it first came out.
That's what I'm saying. You're gonna be just like that the Robin Hood guy who is stealing vintage planes and crashing them, only having learned on the simulator.
The barefoot bandit.
Yeah, I really don't like that guy. He ruined some guy's handcrafted, reconstructed aircraft just on a whim.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, here's listen. So this is what we're talking about here. They have this route. They make their position reports. First, it's going to be Windsor, then Cleveland, then Akron, and then Columbiana, and then on to Butler.
Well, here's the thing I want to plant for later. Researchers who examined the unredacted SOC or summary of circumstances after the fact have tried to back calculate, as I said earlier, the fuel burn. And I guess the math doesn't work. The numbers don't reconcile as to what happened here. The very first person who looked at this case in an official capacity with documentary access actually wrote in pencil in the margins that something didn't add up with the fuel.
Interesting. And this is before any of the rumors start forming.
Yeah, before there's any rumor. Before there's a Howard Hughes theory or a Vegas showgirl theory or anything else. We'll be getting to those. But the mystery starts inside the official report in this case.
Yes, official reports spark many legends and rumors and conspiracy theories, honestly.
Yes, they do. So the guys hit the Butler radio beacon. This is 17 nautical miles northeast of Pittsburgh. And the fuel gauges start to move more in a bad way.
Oh, okay. You're like tapping on them. Remember the opening of Close Encounters. I just love that. The tap on the mechanical gauges to get them free. But these are gauges that are moving more than they should have, not by a lot, but enough that one of the three pilots in the cockpit notices the movement. The flight had been conducted with, and now this is the report's language here, quote, normal engine power settings and the mixture beyond the auto lean position, end of quote. Now, what this means is that they were running as efficiently as the airplane could possibly run concerning fuel and all that.
So they're flying clean, pretty clean.
Yeah, you could say that. They're flying clean, and the gauges still moved. So by the time they reached the New Alexandria beacon, which is 31 nautical miles east of Greater Pittsburgh, the report describes it as, another quote here, an obvious and unusual decrease in the fuel indication on all tanks, end quote. About 120 gallons, it was indicated.
Okay, so how much should it be?
Well, a lot higher.
Okay.
So, by the math that they did at Selfridge, this should have been substantially higher. So if you understand what we're saying here is that they're burning through a whole lot more fuel than their calculations and the gauges would have indicated. Right?
Right. Well, burning might not be the right word. We don't really know.
Well, that's true. It could be leaking. Right. Yeah. Something's wrong here.
Something is not right.
Yeah, this isn't adding up. It should be a relatively simple gauge. It's fuel, how much it burns at what rate, at what altitude, against what headwinds and all that. That's all calculated.
Right.
Same thing with Amelia Earhart. That's what a lot of people have back engineered and reported over. Like, well, this is where they should have been. So if they did run out of fuel, they would have ditched here.
Right.
But as we know from Amelia Earhart, there's a lot of other factors involved which could alter that calculation. So in this case, though, they're about 40 minutes out from Olmsted. So at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, Jameson keys Pittsburgh Center on UHF Channel 5 and asks for a change of destination. Because now they're starting to feel like, okay, should we take some action here?
Yeah. So they decide that they want to get to, that their best shot is at the Greater Pittsburgh Airport. Whether there's 3,000 feet with broken cloud cover, 10 miles visibility, manageable.
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah. So they're going to put down at Greater Pittsburgh and figure out where the gas is going.
Right. And just about 3 minutes later at 4:03 p.m., they spot a hole in the cloud cover. Now, whether that was punched out by a UFO, just like at O'Hare, I don't know. But they cancel the instrument flight rules clearance at 4:04 p.m. and then descend through the hole into the visible world, right? So now you can see where you're going. They drop down to about 3,000 feet as indicated. The terrain over western Pennsylvania at that location is 1,100 to about 1,200 feet. And that means they're flying at maybe 1,800 feet above the ground. That height, it's basically rooftop altitude for an airplane this size. So pretty low for an aircraft this large. And when they look down at the gauges again, now the wing tanks are reading empty. Not a good sign. The main tanks are showing about just 80 gallons.
Yeah, and everything is still going down fast. The fuel level is dropping at a rate that doesn't match anything, and they can't see any kind of leak. They're looking around. They can't see anything going on. The engines are operating normally. The airplane is doing everything it's supposed to be doing, but the fuel is leaving the tanks faster than the engines could possibly be burning it or consuming it.
Yeah, so you have a dangerous mystery brewing here, and we have now the 3 pilots looking at the same problem, and none of them are able to explain it, at least in the air. They're now over the populated southern fringe of Pittsburgh, and they alter their course south to avoid any housing because they realize if they go down, they don't want to crash into any houses. And Dotson is already, in real time, choosing where the airplane is going to come down if it has to come down. So if they have to ditch, you want something flat and level, if possible, and unpopulated. And Greater Pittsburgh Airport is now out of their reach. So he calls for the Allegheny County Airport instead, which is about 15 nautical miles southeast.
Yeah, so he's running out of options. Like, where can they get to?
Yeah, so as this progresses, your choices now are becoming severely limited.
Right.
So then at 4:09 p.m., the Monongahela River appears in the windshield, in the windscreen here. Like, it becomes visible, and now both engines quit.
Ugh. Yeah.
3,000 feet indicated at this point. Jameson keys the Mayday, Mayday, B-25 going into the river. And that phrase gets logged into the Allegheny County Tower at 4:09 p.m. on the dot.
Right. And at this point, the Allegheny County Airport is out of the question. They're not going to make it.
Yeah, exactly. There's no airport anywhere for this airplane anymore. The best option now is just the river.
Have you been following all the hoopla about weight loss injections?
There's no way to get around it, sir. Yeah, especially on TV with all the celebrities and people, and they suddenly look great. But before that, even because I'm really curious about medications that have alternate uses to them, and I don't know if you probably knew this, but did you know that those weight loss injections are a type of receptor agonist called GLP-1. And the way that they work, well, actually, it was initially designed to treat type 2 diabetes. But then they found that, there's weekly injections, and they really transform the whole weight loss landscape. And the way it works is that they mimic natural gut hormones, the ones that regulate appetite, and they signal your brain that you're full, and then they slow down stomach emptying.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's a trick. As our friend Travis used to say, it's a trick. Your body's being tricked.
Which is also pretty interesting to me. But, everybody, yes, you're right. Everybody's talking about the weight loss injections because the results are so dramatic. And as we said, they work by lowering blood sugar and reducing appetite. But hold on a minute. What if you're looking to lose weight, but you're really not interested in painful weekly injections? And especially once you start hearing about some folks that have those really intense side effects.
Well, that's why doctors created a weight loss supplement called Lean, and the results are remarkable.
Yeah, the studied ingredients in Lean have been shown to lower your blood sugar, and what happens then is that it burns fat by converting it into energy. Therefore, you curb your appetite and cravings so you're not as hungry.
But listen, Lean is not for the casual dieter with only a few pounds to lose. The doctors at Brickhouse Nutrition created Lean for frustrated dieters with 10 or more pounds to lose.
That's right, and here is even better news. They're having a huge Memorial Day sale, and Lean is 25% off.
Visit takelean.com and enter thank you 25, that's the number 25, for 25% off.
That's promo code THANKYOU25 at takelean.com. Well, now that summer is knocking on the door, that means fun gatherings with family and friends, vacations, garden parties and barbecues, fireworks, the pool, beach, or lake, camping, and lots of outdoor activities, all that good summer stuff.
Yes. You have any of that planned?
Oh, no. Not for me. I don't get to do any of that stuff. I'm in the basement working on a podcast. But I really do enjoy seeing pics and vids of other people having fun and living vicariously through them.
I see. Well, you know what? Sharing all those good times from your phone can sure take a bite out of your data allotment. And if you happen to go over your limit, That's when big wireless carriers really like to gouge your wallet.
Oh, they sure do. And I learned that hard lesson sending 4K videos to folks which really didn't ask for them. But yeah, you can go over and it can sneak up on you. And speaking of big wireless, it's not like they haven't been soaking you all those years in the meantime, and not in the good way. What with their overage charges, like you said, on top of their normally super high monthly charges, and all those free perks that actually end up costing you more in the long run, which was their diabolical plan all along.
Inconceivable. Do I sound
Nice.
like him? I don't know. Well, not that inconceivable.
Yeah,
Since their business model is to hold you upside down and shake as much money out of you as they can, which is why Forrest and I finally got fed up and switched to Mint Mobile. And we've been saving so much money ever since, and with as much data as we want, with great coverage and call quality and superb customer service.
Yeah, it really is as much data as I can eat. Back in the olden days, we didn't have as many options for wireless carriers because, no doubt it's a super expensive business endeavor, and you didn't have as much competition between companies, so it seemed like they got to charge you whatever they wanted to. But nowadays, you don't have to overpay just because, well, that's how it's always been.
Yeah, thank goodness we have Mint these days because they exist purely to fix that. And how Mint fixes that is by offering you premium wireless plans starting at just $15 a month.
And you get everything you had with the old carriers and more. Like all plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. And you can bring your own phone and number, activate with eSIM in minutes, and start saving immediately. No long-term contracts, no hassle. And with Mint, the data plan I ordered, I've never run out for what I need.
Yeah, me either. Not once. It's time to ditch overpriced wireless and get 3 months of premium wireless service from Mint Mobile for $15 a month.
Indeed it is. So if you like your money like we do, Mint Mobile is for you. Shop plans at mintmobile.com/AL.
That's mintmobile.com/AL.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month 5GB plan required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customer offer for first 3 months only, then full price plan options available.
Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Saloka, and this is Astonishing Legends, where there are no TLDRs. Now let's get back to the show.
Okay, so picture the bridge. It's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, late January. Sun's already getting low, actually.
Yep.
Sundown in Pittsburgh that day was around 5:30. So we're entering what cinematographers call the golden hour.
Right.
The Homestead High Level Bridge at this point is full of cars in both directions. Forrest, you already brought it up earlier, but what does it remind you of?
Well, it's got the vibe of the Silver Bridge in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. I think, the Small Town Monsters crew, Seth and gang, were just there.
Oh, cool.
So they held out great pictures on Instagram. Yeah, check that out, folks.
I'm going to check that out myself.
If we ever come into some money, I would pay just to be on there, just to hang out and eat their food and, and pal around. It looks so much fun just shooting one of those. But this is the Silver Bridge business it's about 11 years later on December 15th, 1967 from the incident we're talking about here. But almost about the same time of day, 4:58 p.m. And it is packed with cars just before it fails. And if you remember and are familiar with it, some would say that the Mothman gave warning to just about a year exactly before this incident, and was seen after. So the Mothman is knitted into the legend.
Yeah, and earlier you asked about if there was any common ground between the Weikert Truss and the Silver Bridge, but there's not. It's a different kind of structure. That's called an I-bar chain bridge, I think it is.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And that one, they tracked its collapse down to one of those failing. I-bar chain suspension bridge, I should say, which is different from a truss bridge. There are trusses, but it's actually a more complicated design than the bridge we're talking about tonight. But anyway, similar environment for sure, but no Mothman in this legend that we know of.
Sure?
But there are people crossing the Homestead High Level Bridge from the south side, coming home from the J&L mill that we mentioned earlier. People going south for whatever reason it is. People did that in 1956. And up the river from the northeast, a B-25 bomber is descending toward the bridge silently.
Yeah, no sound, and not by choice. The propellers on the B-25 are feathered, which makes it easier to glide.
Yes.
Do you want to explain what feathering the propellers means to our folks?
You're putting that on me. I don't really know, but I think what it means is that you angle the blades for the least amount of resistance. So that the plane can maximize its forward velocity and have the most lift on the wings, in spite of the fact that it's not under power.
I'm going with that.
Okay.
Yes.
So if I'm wrong, I know we have so many real live pilots.
We do have a few pilots in there.
Somebody can correct me, but that's my guess on what I believe that means.
Yeah, and in this case, people on the bridge, this would be drivers and passengers, they see this thing in their peripheral vision and they stop their cars in the middle of the bridge. And witnesses said the next morning that the plane cleared the bridge by about 30 feet, so quite a buzzing.
Yes.
Andy Masick at the Heinz History Center, as you folks there know, Heinz Ketchup and all their other fabulous pickle products,
indeed,
big in the Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh area. They interviewed many of the people involved over the years, and the estimation is now more like 50 feet.
Right.
Still pretty low.
Yeah.
Makes quite an impression. And the eyewitnesses on a bridge looking up at an airplane don't agree really on the altitude, but both numbers we came across in our research.
Yeah. Either way, it's low.
It's a much too low for comfort. And as you've seen, remember the just happened a couple of weeks ago, the airliner that clipped the light standard at that one airport.
Oh, yeah.
It flipped a truck too.
That's right.
Which has to be a wild commute home.
Yeah.
Well, this plane here, it's lined up downstream, southwest, and the pilot now has the flaps down and the wheels are up. He doesn't want the gear catching the water and then flipping the plane. So, if you followed that Sully Sullenberger, he did the exact right thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Because again, if you have big jets hanging down, those scoop the water, which will flip the plane. So it takes a little bit of skill and, ice running through your veins. The river is now about 8 to 10 knots of current on that day, 800 to 1,000 feet wide, right at that splashdown point, the width of the river. And the river is about 25 to 35 feet deep, as we've said. And then the water is about 35 degrees, so chilly.
And the air is 27, so it's below freezing.
Yes, chilly all around. Well, it's a typical Pittsburgh winter.
Yeah.
Also pretty chilly here. And the Pittsburgh Press the next morning quoted a witness who saw it splash and said it looked like, quote, a huge geyser, end of quote. So like a massive amount of water being pushed up. White froth, vertical, going up taller than the bridge.
Yeah.
And it held on for a second, this column of water, then it collapsed. And the airplane, which is now still perfectly intact, structurally fine, is now floating in the middle of the Monongahela River.
There's one description I saw. This was from a Facebook post by a haunted history tour company in Pittsburgh. So it's not got the tier 1 source level that we all,
right.
But it said that the plane actually submerged when it crashed and then came back up.
I suppose it's possible, sure.
Yeah, so it's possible. But anyway, when it hit the water, the impact apparently also rotated it so that the nose was facing south, even though the river was pulling it to the west, according to one account anyway. And the men, as we'd said, they had no raft or life jackets. And then the nose started going down, so they're moving toward the back of the plane. But reportedly, no one seemed panicked. And in fact, they all were whistled at the same time together to try to get somebody's attention on shore.
Yeah, there was one guy who was working near the Glenwood Bridge, heard them yell, "You got a boat?"
Yeah.
But he did not. And, but boats were on the way. But like I said, it's for military people, especially ones that have been through combat.
Yeah.
They usually do not panic because panic can get you killed.
That's
and
right.
others around you killed. Remember, it was at 0 Dark 30, like somebody says, anybody here been in a helo crash?
Yeah.
And like most of the SEAL team operators raise their hand.
Yeah, there you go.
It's not ideal, but you know what to do. So they don't seem to be panicking.
Yeah, and so again, we had 6 men aboard. All of them are alive. None of them are apparently injured. They climb out. They're on the upper surfaces of the plane, on the wings, the fuselage, on top of the cockpit, while they can be. Airplanes drifting south-southwest at the speed of the current, toward the Glenwood Bridge, the next bridge down, toward Beck's Run, which the road we mentioned earlier. Now, with all of these witnesses, I mean, we're predating cell phones here, but word is out and the city is responding.
Yeah, and they're actually responding pretty fast. The first call comes in at 4:13 p.m., so just after splashdown, a local citizen named James Freeman to operator Walt Gellick at the Pittsburgh Police Communications Center. And within seconds, it's classified as a major disaster. And then other operators, Howard Wacker and Regis O'Donnell, take the microphones and then start dispatching 7 ambulances, 5 police cars, and every motorcycle officer they have to the scene.
Yeah, the Marine radio station WCM out in Irwin keeps a clear channel for what they're already calling crash calls.
Right.
Jones and Laughlin, that's J&L Steel, their dispatcher at Rutherglen Street that Forrest mentioned earlier, a man named Frank Kuzak sends out J&L's diesel towboat, the Titan, under Captain James Cipher, and 2 more towboats, the Charles Zubik and the Beaver, are also already moving toward the drifting plane.
Right. People are closing in here.
Yeah.
And the Air Force report says the plane has been floating by this point about 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Andy Masick at the Heinz History Center cites 11, which is probably the most accurate single number, I would guess here.
Yeah.
So let's say 11 minutes. 6 men on the wings of an airplane drifting downstream in a swift and freezing river, knowing that the airplane is going to sink. That's going to happen. And knowing they can't stay with it. And also knowing the water is cold, about 35 degrees.
Yeah.
And they're watching towboats race towards them and also have to figure the towboats might not get there in time.
As you said earlier, after the crash, there's a suggestion that things were, both calm and also terrifying at the same time.
Absolutely. So now we're on to the actions happening while this thing is down.
Yeah.
And before the airplane sinks, while 6 men are still standing on it in freezing river, we need to tell you who 2 of those men were, because in about 8 minutes, one of them is going to drown in front of his co-pilot.
Yeah, this is horrible. They all
Yeah, it
survived
really
the
is.
accident, but they
Yeah.
did not all make it to shore.
Yeah, that twist of fate, it always gets me. When I, hear about a veteran coming home, like surviving 3 tours in Helmand Province or just, Afghanistan, and then some accident, car accident, or someone gets shot by some idiot. They
Yeah.
just survived all that.
Yeah.
And you come home and something dumb takes your life.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things you would think could be avoided, but this is an extreme situation here. And Captain Gene P. Ingraham of South Charleston, and then the contemporaneous newspaper articles are all over the place about the state, and then even the spelling of his name. But the Air Force called him Ingraham. So I'm
Yes.
talking about the differentiation in his name spelling here. The Pittsburgh Press spelled it Ingram.
Right.
So if you go to research this on your own, just know that. But he was in the forward crew compartment when the engines quit. And he was just a passenger on the airplane.
Yeah, and then we have, again, the aforementioned that we brought up earlier, Staff Sergeant Walter Eugene Soucy, the crew chief, 32 years old, born July 29th, 1923. Married to a woman named Patricia, who was a Baptist minister's daughter. They had 4 children, 3 girls and a boy, and his parents lived in Palmer, Alaska.
Right. And one thing I want to comment here, if you've never seen it, take a look at pictures online of the cockpit inside a Mitchell B-25 or really any other military aircraft. Because what you have to keep in mind when designing military aircraft is space is premium, so is weight.
Right.
And so it's very cramped to most people's standards. You're sitting by your co-pilot shoulder to shoulder practically. Any warfighting cockpit here is that it's very compact and cramped. You got a lot of instruments, and I think with the Mitchell, you have to climb up. It's not a straight shot like it would be on a passenger aircraft, right? A passenger plane where it's a straight walk. So yeah, it's not easy to move around,
Right.
much like it wasn't on Amelia Earhart's Electra, where Fred Noonan, to get to the back, had to crawl on his belly over gas tanks.
Right.
Now, getting back to Jameson,
Yeah.
we know this because the report mentions this specifically.
Yeah.
He goes to check that all 6 men can swim,
Yeah.
and then they take off their shoes, and there's a log, fortunately, in the water nearby, big enough for some of them, but not all of them. And now we're back to the floating door in Titanic.
So how do we know this about this log?
Right. And we know this because the SOC, this summary of circumstances, does mention that, the unredacted version of it. The quote is, Sergeant Alleman and Airman Smith and Major Dotson reached the nearby log successfully. Because the log seemed too small for all 6, Sergeant Alleman swam to shore. And that's the end of the quote. And the log holds 3 people. Alleman gets to it first. He does the math, and then he strikes out for the bank, the riverbank.
Alone in 35-degree water with a very strong current.
Yeah, and he barely makes it. But I would say also that amount of physical exertion is maybe helping with your body temperature here.
Right.
Now, a Baldwin police lieutenant named Charles Colosi sees him from the south bank of the river.
Yeah.
And then a truck driver from Alliance, Ohio, Don Devine, age 32. He is a driver for the J. Miller Company of Cleveland. He also sees him.
Right.
And Devine, he wades into the river to get to him
Yeah.
and gets about 25 feet out. And then the cold becomes too much and retreats. And he comes back in when Alman finally reaches the branches of the bank on the side of the tree branches here. And he grabs him, and Colosi pulls them both ashore. And Dotson and Smith stay with the log. And I just want to, if you've ever been in really super cold water.
Oh God, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. For most that haven't, I want to relate. I just remember one time it was I was on a family trip to Glacier Park.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Northwestern Montana. Beautiful. Everybody should go. It's one of the most beautiful national parks in the country.
Yeah.
And it was a super hot day. And I remember my grandparents were there like, hey, you want to take a dip? They're just going to pull off, sit in lawn chairs and relax for a bit.
Yep.
From the drive, they said, well, you could go take a dip in the lake there. And I can't remember the lake of it, but it's Glacier Park. So I just remember like, oh, it's so hot. This would be so refreshing. Get on the swimsuit, and the middle of this very small lake or even pond size kind of a body of water is kind of murky green in the middle. That's because it's melting glacier water.
Right.
And I get out, it's like, it was just so hot, I'm sweating. I get out to about my knees, then up to my hips, and the water is so cold. And I was young and healthy back then. And the knees started hurting so bad. It's like, okay, I can't take much more of this. So I dove in quickly. It was quite uncomfortable, but it was refreshing.
Yes. Well,
but my point being is that you think it's like, oh, how cold could it be?
Yeah.
But your joints start aching bad.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
at least mine did. So
you start to
you
look
can't
like
last that
one
long.
of these sci-fi movies. What happens when you take your suit off in space?
Yeah.
Well, so coming back to the log here, the tug that we mentioned earlier, or the towboat, the Titan from the J&L Mill with Captain James Cipher, it reaches
all great names, by the way.
Yeah, really,
just very
great stuff.
Cinematic. Yeah.
It reaches them in about 15 minutes after the splashdown. Mark Brandon and Isaac Dominic of the Titan's crew pulled Dotson out of the water and warmed him up in the engine room. Smith was found a little later clinging to a log of his own by the crew of another towboat, the Henry Zubik, and brought ashore at the J&L coal dock at Hazelwood Avenue. But what about Jameson? What happened with Jameson?
Yeah, well, Jameson, he found a small wooden post that was floating in the water. So thank God it's polluted for them, somewhat. But it's not really big enough to be a flotation device. It's just enough to keep his head up out of the water.
Right.
But he held on to it. And the Pittsburgh Police River Patrol pulled him out on the opposite of Beck's Run.
Right.
So that's now 4 survivors who have been rescued.
Right. So Captain Ingraham was watched by Jameson the whole time. Jameson saw him in the water, saw him struggling. But then at some point, and the report is pretty clinical about this in the way that Air Force reports are clinical, Jameson observed Ingraham to disappear beneath the water.
Yeah, and Sergeant Susie was last seen on what the report calls unidentified debris.
Right.
Then he left it, and then he was seen last swimming toward the left bank of the Mon, and sadly he went under about 50 or 60 feet from the shore.
Sad circumstances here. Pittsburgh Police Assistant Superintendent Lawrence Maloney was quoted the next morning as saying, and this was our opening quote tonight, one of them disappeared in that dirty water less than 50 feet from the men who were trying to get to him. That's what hurts.
So close and yet just too far.
Yeah.
But 35-degree water will kill a healthy adult on average in about 15 to 20 minutes or 30 minutes. So about 15 to 30 minutes is your expected survival time. And what happens is the cold water shocks you first, and then you have a gasp reflex, which means you have an involuntary intake or inhale of water.
Yeah.
And then progressively incapacitated as the body shunts the blood away from the limbs.
Right.
So everything kind of slows down, and that's just the reaction.
So the plane drifted about a mile from where it had splashed down, and then it sank. Ingraham and Susie were gone. They passed, and 4 men were now on their way to the Montefiore Hospital and the McGee Hospital. The whole rescue, from the first call to the police operator to the 4 survivors arriving at the hospital, took about 17 minutes.
Yeah, not a whole amount of time, but in that amount of time, a lot of damage can happen. And at this point, the airplane was now gone too.
Yes, it was. So the next morning, February 1st, 1956, a U.S. Coast Guard cutter named the Forsythia was dragging the river near Beck's Run, and they had a 350-pound anchor that they were dragging across the bottom, trying to find the airplane. This is what dragging is. When you hear them say, "Oh, we dragged the lake, we dragged the river, we dragged," when the police do that, that's you're literally dragging something, trying to hook something. And in this case, the Forsythia did hook something.
Yeah, something big.
That's right. The crew of the Forsythia thought they had snagged one of the wings of the B-25.
Yeah, so this is, so far, this is pretty straightforward and going as expected. They're not going to imagine that they won't find this plane pretty quickly, right? I mean, again, not that deep. Yeah, the current's running, but this should be doable. This thing's 13 tons. It's 67 feet across. So they snag this thing and then start hauling it towards the surface, and then
the anchor slips.
Of course.
The wing or whatever it was goes back down, so they try again. They come around for a second pass. They hook it again. And this time, the load was heavy enough that the 2-inch steel tow line snapped from the tension.
That's a serious tow line, not something you could probably coil up by yourself.
Yeah, it's probably one of the lines that they use for the barges that they're running around all the time with, coal or whatever on them. So they're beginning to think it snapped because they had hooked something close to the full weight of the 13-ton plane.
And then now, of course, they're going to try for the charm, the third try here.
Yes. So this third try, they got a smaller anchor, lost it.
Right.
The hook sheared off and went down. And after that, the Forsythia never reestablished contact with the airframe or whatever it was that they had theoretically hooked.
Yeah, I do wonder what they actually hooked here. But of course, simple logic would say it was the plane. So the only confirmed post-sinking contact now that we're talking about that anyone ever had with what might have been the airplane was a Coast Guard cutter that hooked it 3 times, and then it lost it 3 times in the span of about 24 hours.
Yeah, that's it. That's the only physical contact, and they never laid eyes on it.
Right.
As far as I can find in any of the reporting. So one has to wonder if that could have been something else, although something that large, you would think they would know it was down there if it wasn't the plane. But the Forsythia's ship's log, the actual logbook where the captain wrote down what happened, that's in the Heinz History Center's archive in Pittsburgh in a collection called MSS 406, the B-25 Recovery Group collection, which there's a lot of references to online. Unfortunately, it is not digitized. There's some parts of it that you can find online. I would love to have been able to access that for this episode, but we need to get there in person, and I can't quite get to Pittsburgh right now.
They probably don't let you photograph or take notes. You have to just read it while you're there. It's kind of like when we covered Sheriff Henry Plummer.
Yes.
There was one great book that was in the Los Angeles main public library downtown. It's like you couldn't check it out. So you had to read. It's like, what am I going to come back every day for a month and read it? Like, yeah, if you want to. But I could take some snapshots with my phone of it. But yeah, it's just one of those things. Anyway, every conspiracy theory you're going to hear in the second half of this episode, every story about midnight cover-ups and trucks moving wreckage out of town. Boy, it's sounding like the Kecksburg case. Right. There's always flatbed trucks covering something up, moving them out of town.
Yes.
And then, here's one. The CIA hiring drivers to haul plane parts out to missile bases.
Yeah.
Every one of those theories, conspiracy or not, starts right here. With a snagged wing and a slipped anchor and a snapped 2-inch line.
Right. Because at this exact moment, on the morning of February 1st, 1956, the U.S. military theoretically knows where this plane is. They had it on a hook, and they lost it. So they spend the next 13 days trying to find it again, and they never do.
Right.
Forrest.
Yes?
You know what I'm going to do?
No, I don't.
I'm going to be more intentional about what I wear day to day, leaning into pieces that feel easy, comfortable, while still looking put together. It just makes getting dressed simpler.
Alert the media. Well, that was for our Arthur fans in the audience.
Yes.
Perfect movie. Anyway, all those characters were so well styled. You know, it made a lasting impression. And seriously, I'm going to do the same. And for us, Quince is our go-to for all things fashion because Quince's fits are clean and feel bespoke. The fabrics feel elevated. And you're right. The best part is we don't like overthinking it.
Nope. And Quince has everything you'll need for spring into summer, like 100% European linen shorts and shirts from $34.
Yeah, I like their linen short sleeve shirts so much, I just got more in different colors. And I get all the benefits of Quince linen, comfortable, breathable, lightweight, and just as important to me, affordable. So now I'm looking into upping my pants game to get that same balance of being relaxed, but still classy enough they work for any occasion or location.
Pants game. Nice. Also,
Yeah.
I would like you to up your pants anyway. But you're right. The prices are affordable enough that you can up your game for your whole wardrobe. And Quince makes that possible because everything is priced 50 to 80% less than what you would find for similar brands. And Quince works directly with ethical factories and cuts out the middlemen. So you're getting premium materials without the markup. And yeah, I'm stocking up on their 100% Pima cotton tees because of the unbelievable softness while still looking stylish.
Oh yeah, those are one of my faves too. So now's the time to refresh your everyday with luxury you'll actually use. Head to quince.com/AL for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns.
Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/AL for free shipping and 365-day returns.
Quince.com/AL. One thing Scott and I often come across in our research is a website where you can tell it's all hastily slapped together by AI. Like you see bad or ho-hum, plain as paper graphic design, if any. And the writing is like what I call brochure copy, which often just repeats the same info, and it all kind of feels fake and just there to stake out a spot of the internet and waste your time.
Yep, that's why there will always be a need for a website platform like Squarespace. With its gorgeous, stylish, sophisticated design and cutting-edge functionality, Squarespace gives you every element you need to rise above all that slop out there and succeed in whatever you're doing, with a look and feel that's organically you.
Yeah, and if you'd like a little AI help, well, of course, Squarespace offers that too with their Blueprint AI feature, which is their AI-enhanced design partner, making your site less bot and more you. Because trust us, folks can still tell when something doesn't pass the sniff test. And when your visitors sense your professionalism, your sense of style and genuineness, you gain their trust and their business.
And if you want it to be all you, you can choose from a library of professionally designed and award-winning templates. But no matter how you choose to start, rest assured that a Squarespace website will adapt and adjust to whatever you need. We've been with Squarespace soon after we started, and it's evolved with us. The editing is drag and drop, there's spectacular visual design effects, and any AI content will be on brand. And the best part is there's no experience required.
Yeah, and speaking of evolving, people are getting pretty creative out there with these side hustles, like clever folks offering experiences and events. Like our friend Mark could have sold tickets to his Hollywood murder mystery tour, or maybe you could host an event at a haunted location. Whatever it is, a Squarespace website will attract your customers and grow your business just the way you want.
Good ideas, but all that won't matter if you don't get paid. Squarespace can make sure you get paid on time with professional, on-brand invoices and online payments. And you can also optimize your customer engagement with built-in appointment scheduling and email marketing tools.
So stop getting lost in the slop by heading on over to squarespace.com/legends to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain using code LEGENDS.
Forrest and Scott thank you for supporting their sponsors. I'm Friday. Let's get back to the show.
All right, so we left off on February 1st, 1956, the morning after the splashdown, with the Forsythia hooking what may or may not have been the wing 3 times and losing it 3 times. That was the only confirmed post-sinking contact anyone ever may have made with the airframe.
Yeah.
And I want to remind everybody, and I went back and checked through all our notes and research on this, There was differing, maybe apocryphal stories saying that somebody
Yeah.
did see it come out of the water a
Right.
little bit, but it seems like the reality of it is they're not even really sure what they hooked. And there was a lot of stuff at the bottom of that
Yeah.
river. But still, researchers point to, and when you read the reports on this, they're like, no, they hooked it. That's not a foregone conclusion. I just want to keep that in everyone's mind right there. But after that, the cable snapped and they had all those problems. The search was just searching. 2 days later, February 3rd, the Army Corps of Engineers brings in a dredging barge and runs 150 passes up and down the river. Nothing.
You're right. We're talking about just 2 days later. Just 2 days. Keep that in mind. Also, you made a good point. I was going to reiterate, if you did not, in that officially, no one actually saw what was hooked.
Right.
So again, I know that sounds conspiratorial, but like they don't know what they grabbed a hold of. They're assuming, of course, it's the plane. So again, that's an unknown.
Right.
So now we're talking about the Army Corps of Engineers bringing in specialists. On Monday, February 13th, the tug Redstone, run by a man named Russell White, comes up from Pittsburgh with 2 experts from the Louisville Engineers Office. This would be Carlos Wilson and P.L. Sharp. And they've got an echo depth finder. Okay, now we're getting technical here. So they sweep the stretch between the Point, which is the confluence of the Allegheny and the Mon at downtown Pittsburgh, and the Splashdown site, and then just below the Amoco oil plant. Remember Amoco is a company? Are they still around? Yeah, I think they are.
I don't know. I think they
but this area it would be near Beck's Run Road, okay?
Yes.
And the needle draws a hole. 200 feet wide, 47 feet deep water here. The river around it is 20 feet deep. And what that means is the needle finds a hole 200 feet wide, 47 feet deep. Now remember, the river itself is about 20 feet deep. And because it's a heavily trafficked industrial river, navigation hazards are a serious threat, not only to safety, but investment by, we're talking about giant industrial powerhouses that are all on the river right there.
There should not be any secrets on the bottom in this case. They can't afford the risk. The depth finder shows them the hole. Here's the thing about that. The hooks can't get into it. You can't drag down in there. So they mark it on the chart and they keep working the humps and the rises on the bottom in their other areas. And the depth finder helps them highlight that stuff and figure out where they need to go. Now, White, the tug captain, told the Post-Gazette the next day, quote, "You'd think we'd at least pick up something or see some wreckage by now. We've searched every inch of the shoreline and haven't even seen anything that resembles a piece of the plane," end quote. Sharp added, the lack of wreckage would indicate that the plane's still in one piece. It was a heavy plane, so it can't have drifted too far, even in this current. A heavy current, actually, he said, end quote. So
yeah, so things are not making much sense at this point. Quick anecdote here, and it just reminded me of like hooking something that's mysterious, just popped in my mind. I went fishing with my great-grandparents one time, just the 3 of us, and we're out on this lake, and something caught my line.
Yeah,
I wasn't that old, but I'd been fishing a lot before that. And whatever it was so big and heavy and forceful, it bent the pole, my fishing pole, all the way down to the curve of the rowboat.
Okay, yeah.
First you're excited in that millisecond of like you got a bite, and I just held on, and then you panic. Like what I should have done was release some drag on the reel, right? So it kept going. But like I got this thing, oh my God. And then just like it bent the pole all the way down. I think I'm starting to make exciting, like, oh my God, grandpa, look at this. And then whatever it was did not budge a bit. It just snapped the line.
Oh, wow.
And the pole springs up.
Yeah.
And I think by the time they started paying attention to me, it's like, there was something big. They're like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
I think they knew, obviously they could see that the line was snapped. But I'm going to guess that it was maybe a massive sturgeon, which can, in that area, can grow from like 8 to 10 to, I think some people said 14 feet. So massive fish, but that's how, because like I said, there was no pull or play with it. It just went down to the side. It just freaked me out a little bit, but it was still exciting. Anyway, getting back to what's fascinating here, because think about this. For example, when we did our series on Flight 19, the Gulf Stream current was a huge potential issue, because depending on where the planes may have gone down, they could have traveled miles between impacting the surface and drifting to the bottom. I want to reiterate, strange things happen underwater. It's like, you think like, oh, there's the Titanic, it should be easy to find, or all these other shipwrecks. There's a
Right.
lot of travel between where it goes under the surface and where it lands.
That's right.
So, yeah, this thing could have traveled miles between impacting the surface and drifting to the bottom. But here, we're only dealing with 25 to 30 feet. We're not dealing with an ocean, right?
Right.
And in the case of this one hole, you could say 47 feet deep, which honestly, it's still not that deep comparatively.
Right.
Okay. But either way, the point is the plane should not have gone that far. And even if the current had been more extreme, the river is so shallow that there shouldn't be a problem finding this plane, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's not making sense. Anyway, but we're not talking about class 3 rapids here.
This 13-ton plane didn't go like flying down with people yelling and screaming wearing life
Right,
jackets.
right.
It's just kind of drifting down. It's a strong current, to be sure. But
Yeah.
so the next day, February 14th, the Air Force makes the call. The wreckage is not a hazard to navigation. They know this because they've done all the dragging. They couldn't find it. So the search is being abandoned 14 days after the splashdown. But, and you may have been wondering about this, where are the 2 guys who drowned? Because we haven't talked about that yet. Their bodies have
Oof.
not turned up.
Yeah, that's it's disturbing
Yeah.
and worrisome.
So the Air Force report has a line in it that goes unchanged for months, actually. It's, quote, "No trace has been found of Captain Ingraham, Sergeant Susie, or the aircraft," end quote. So Pittsburgh's River Patrol apparently at that time was, and maybe still, watching the water through February and into March. And river police know that in the winter, I guess, the bodies usually surface 14 to 21 days after a drowning. But it was almost 4 months before those 2 were found. And part of that was because the river was running high and it was particularly cold all winter. So
Right. Well, Walter Susie's body was finally recovered on May 28th, 1956. And that will
Yes.
be exactly 70 years ago, 5 days after we post this episode to our feed.
yeah.
Another anniversary is a couple days when we started the record on this is the anniversary of Mount St. Helens exploding.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, May 18th, 1980. And then
Yeah.
Captain Gene Ingram's body was recovered later that spring. So it took quite a while, more so than you would normally expect. The exact date and burial location they don't come through cleanly in the public record that we've seen. So it's a little murky there, but he's returned to his family in South Charleston.
And the plane, however, as you obviously know by now, was never recovered. To this day, still not recovered.
Well, there's hence the mystery. At Montefiore Hospital, the day after the splashdown, Colonel Edward F. Roddy, he was the local Air Force unit commander, gives a statement to the Pittsburgh Press. Quote, "The plane, a B-25, gave out of fuel. The gauge was apparently wrong. The engines quit. To avoid hitting any homes, the plane was intentionally landed in the river." End of quote. But we have to point out something here. B-25s had 4 fuel gauges, not just one.
Yeah, so that adds a layer to this. We've already pointed out that they're famous for being inaccurate, but it's unlikely that all 4 would have failed in identical ways.
Yeah, sounding a little like the wet whiskey compass kind of a thing here. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, unless they have an accuracy design flaw, right, they wouldn't have failed. But if they had one this extreme, you'd think they would have been running out of fuel all the time, right?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
just in
all
general,
of
right?
them.
Yeah, is
exactly.
congenital kind of thing. The
Yeah.
standard configuration for these planes was 4 tanks, 2 in the left wing and then 2 in the right wing, and those were divided into forward and aft or rear tanks. So
Right.
there were 4 main quantity gauges, and then on top of that, 2 fuel pressure gauges, or 2 indicators anyway, that monitored the fuel pressure for the left and the right wing, for these radial engines, which were the Wright R2600s in the B-25, all right? Both of those pressure gauges might appear in a single indicator, okay? But the point is, with 4 gauges indicating levels and 2 gauges monitoring fuel pressure, if something's wonky, there's a lot of information there to make a deduction from, right? The more data points you have, easier it is to triangulate a problem.
Right, exactly. And this is something that I thought was weird about what Colonel Roddy said. If the quote to the Pittsburgh Press is accurate, and we know from doing the show over the years, a lot of times that stuff is just barely slapped in there. But he supposedly said the gauge was apparently wrong. I'm quoting that. The gauge was apparently wrong. And used the word gauge singular.
Yeah.
You'd think, as an Air Force commander, He would
Yeah.
know there's multiple gauges in that aircraft and most aircraft. So
Yeah.
you'd think he would have said gauges. It's a dumb thing for me to bump on, I guess, but it gives rise to a
yeah.
made up observation to cover something else happened, or just a quick statement to say, hey, nothing to see here. Stop asking
Right.
me questions kind of thing.
Right. Possibly.
I mean, maybe it's nothing.
You folks would be surprised, not
Yeah.
about all the time Scott and I we're all flub a line, and I want to make sure the intonation is right because I
Yes.
misspoke. It's pretty common, and especially under a pressure situation like that, we're trying to make a statement. Case in point, I was on jury duty once, and there was an officer from the ATF,
Right.
alcohol, tobacco, firearms for those in the States, and also explosives, so ATFE. And they were testifying about finding a gun on the suspect. And the guy who's supposed to be, he's with the ATF. He's a firearms expert. And he said, like, yes, there was a 40 millimeter weapon. And I just thought, like, well, that's a grenade launcher. Like, that's, this is under oath, and this is for the record. There's a stenographer taking notes here. It's like, and I just like, whoa, well, if you're entering into that, I mean, I don't know if that's a technicality that could get somebody off because, like, well, then you don't know what you're talking about. What he meant was a 40 caliber, which I think would be about 10 millimeter round. So, he misspoke grossly.
Maybe this guy just kind of said under pressure, said the wrong
You
thing.
never know, but it is a curious point to look at.
It's not a red flag.
No.
But it is a strange thing to me, though. He's going to know there's multiple fuel gauges in that aircraft. So
you would think. But, look, the speculation about what this flight may have been transporting in this light takes on a life of its own.
Yeah.
Could it be an atom bomb, nerve gas, or Howard Hughes and Vegas Showgirls, or separately Vegas Showgirls?
Yeah,
look at the speculation about the whole flight of Glenn Miller, the jazz band leader.
I kind of want to cover Glenn Miller.
We should.
I don't know how much there is to cover. It's kind of like he went up, he didn't come down.
Well, no, there's a lot more to it, as we were told by one of our friends and compatriots on Gledder's Anomaly Christmas show. Did a whole episode on that. Yeah, so there's a lot there, actually. Or think about this, Cold War era, right? A Soviet defector being shuttled. Right. Could have been mafia money, who knows? Or communications gear from Area 51, or right, Pat? Or cadavers from Roswell. Okay, now we're getting into my favorite territory, kind of like Maui Island. Like, is this debris from something? And did the debris cause the crash or something to evaporate the plane? I don't know. Whatever Pittsburgh was doing in the 50s and 60s, whatever they were anxious about, somebody eventually put it on that plane, maybe.
Yeah. Andy Masick at the Heinz History Center put it well in a 2023 interview with the Pittsburgh City paper. He said, it's turned into kind of a fun ghost story for Pittsburghers. But to Dotson, he lost 2 crew members. He never wanted to talk about it afterwards.
Yeah, that's completely understandable. There's often tragedy at the heart of these mysteries.
This is Sandy H. Crane, shadowy curator of the Astonishing Legends Facebook group's NISA Awards. Will your name be detected in the portents? Join us over in the group to find out. Now, back to the show.
Why don't you tell us about some of the other theories here as we get into the stretch?
Okay, yeah. So we need to start with the wild ones. These were hard to categorize, but they break into roughly 4 groups or 4 clusters. There's the midnight removal theory. That's the one I want to start with, if you don't mind, for us. This comes from a Pittsburgh family whose account has been shared online in recent years.
It goes a little something like this. The storyteller's grandfather worked the overnight shift at the Mesta machine plant in Homestead. And this is a big industrial steelworks mill just up the river from the Splashdown site. And on the night of the crash, the grandfather was sent home from a shift early because the rail tracks on the south side of the Monongahela, the stretch from Duquesne down to the south side, had been closed. And on that same night, the storyteller's father and uncle, at this time both teenagers, walked toward the Glenwood Bridge to see what was happening. And they saw portable spotlights illuminating the Hazelwood train yard across the river. When they tried to get closer, they found police at the bridge and military personnel turning their friends back from the yards. Now, years later, this guy's father worked alongside a man who had been on shift in the Hazelwood yard that night. And the coworker said that just after midnight, Recovery crews dragged the fuselage and one wing out of the river, cut the wing off, then loaded both pieces onto a flatbed train and were gone before sunup.
That's a great story. It
Yep.
has specific information. Mesta Machine was a real plant in Homestead. Hazelwood Yard, that's a real rail facility.
Yep.
The bridge, the spotlights, it all has the right feel for what a recovery might have looked like at that time. And it's a multi-generational story,
Yeah,
which gives
yeah.
it the feel of family history, you know, instead of a fabrication maybe.
Right.
But that recovery, if you think about this would have required a derrick or some kind of crane on a barge or on the train maybe. I don't even think you could do it from a train because of the weight. Maybe. Lifting a B-25, 13 tons loaded. But imagine how much, by the way, imagine how much that weighs when you're pulling it out from the bottom of the river and it's also full of water.
True.
Like it's got to be 20, 30 tons. I'm not doing that. They did the math. Put that on Reddit for that one. But anyway, what does a B-25 full of water weigh? Anyway, this would have required all kinds of equipment. And then on top of that, the cutting equipment to sever the wing off on site in the middle of the night. I don't know. It seems to me like the transport, like all of that would have been a very, very big secret to keep.
Yeah, but here's now we're getting into bread and butter territory as far as what we talk about here. We're talking about Kecksburg and people saying like, well, it was a Cosmos 96 or what the hell it was.
Right.
And, it's just a space reentry vehicle that's a little bit steerable. But does that explanation match up? And then we were ready to go with that. It's like, well, that sounds pretty reasonable. It's a steerable kind of thing. That's why it's changing. And then people said, no, it wasn't just veering a little bit. It was like making decided turns.
Right.
And then we talked to Stan Gordon and he said like, oh yeah, there's witnesses I've talked to, at least two. One was the fireman. I think somebody else as well. They said, they loaded that thing onto a flatbed and they tried to tarp it, but underneath people could still see things that look like hieroglyphs.
Yep.
Strange writing markings on the bottom that were not U.S. Air Force or whatever, or the Ruski Red Star, or whatever it is. Yeah. They said like, no, this was something else. And this is nothing we talk about when you're now the popular topic of crash retrievals for UAP and UFOs. Yeah, there's some things you can't get on a flatbed or onto a train, a rail car. So what do? If it's too big, now this is the scuttlebutt around that, is that you build a facility around it and you just keep it there. That's easier to do than try to cut this up. So the other thing too is that this thing was cut up. Maybe that makes things a little easier. Who knows? But yes, I see your points and would tend to agree with them. Now talk about the mills. They're running 3 shifts. The unions were very powerful, still are, and talkative. And then we're talking about a press that was competitive. And if something this big had happened in a working class neighborhood at night, it does seem like the secret would have leaked somewhere, maybe. Okay. But you know what I'm saying? It's like, we all assume that it's like people like, well, the government, they can't keep a secret. It's like, okay, that's not an equivocal or efficient, false equivalency. You know what I'm saying? It's
right.
Yeah, there's other secrets you obviously don't know about. You may know of it, but people say, well, no, people can't keep secrets. Like, yes, they can.
Yeah.
And they do that by threats if they have to. And there's no compunction about not doing that. So the Mesta Machine story is pretty compelling, though.
Yeah, I like it. And I like stories like that come down through families.
Yeah,
because
me too.
I've heard plenty of them locally of weird stories just around here in North Carolina where I live. And I've mentioned them on the show before. The locals have stories of weird stuff happening out in the country, cryptid-oriented things. And it's not on the internet. These are old folks telling these stories that they saw them. Their granddad saw something. There's some people that aren't even on the internet to this day.
Right.
And when they die, those stories are gone.
Well,
except for maybe a few people that heard it at church or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And think about this. People think, well, now we got the internet and it's everything's egalitarian and stories can't get out. It's like, if you entertain the idea that they're feeding you baloney, however they wish to craft some kind of narrative, then it's just as easy to remove stuff from any narrative.
Right.
Even personally, and I do believe that they can take stuff off your personal devices if they so choose. You're not important enough, and thankfully neither are we, to have them bother with that. But I do believe there's that kind of manipulation possible. So back then, it's easy to keep stuff out of papers. People often point to FDR. It's like they told the press, no pictures below the waist. We don't want to show him in a wheelchair.
Right.
And so they just like, okay, we won't. And they didn't back then.
Yeah. And they didn't want to show Marilyn Monroe in the back of JFK's limo. So they didn't, those pictures didn't get published. So,
so there's a little bit more control in some ways and a little bit less in others. And now you're talking about a CIA trucker
Yes.
Boy,
yeah.
I do want a trucker's cap that says that on it.
Yeah, CIA trucker.
Trucks,
That's
yeah,
it's a good band
What?
name, too.
Oh, absolutely. Well, listen to this. In the 70s, the 1970s, a man called into a late night talk show, also love that setup, on Pittsburgh's KDKA radio. And he claimed to have been a truck driver hired by the CIA in the late 1950s to haul a piece of the B-25 to a Nike missile defense site at Oakdale Air Force Station, a few miles west of Pittsburgh.
And we did look for any archival version of that broadcast, couldn't locate one. This story exists today as references in later research files, but not as primary recorded testimony.
Yeah.
So we're working with reports of a phone call that nobody we know has heard. And,
Right.
and there's the simpler explanation that the recovery group raised in the Post-Gazette in 1999. There were other aircraft crashes around Pittsburgh in the same area 2 years before this B-25 went down. In 1954, a DC-3 crashed near McKeesport, actually killed 10 people when that happened. And there were some other crashes too. So the recovery group, which we'll be talking about more here in a minute too, felt that if the Oakdale trucker was real and not like a prank caller into the radio show and was hauling real wreckage, he might have been moving pieces of a different airplane and then conflating it with this one, because it was decades later when he went on the radio show. And maybe he did haul some plane parts out. You can't clearly say he's definitely lying. We just don't have enough information. We don't have a recording of it. We don't know who he was, that kind of thing. But also it is plausible that somebody might have been hired to drive a truck hauling stuff, aviation related wreckage at this time from the general area. So
Right. And of course, that again fits in with the current disclosure narrative, is that the military doesn't do everything. They hire people out.
Right.
Even like simple things like in a base, they hire contractors to make the food. It's not all Army cooks like it used to be. So, yeah, it's just easier, saves them money and time. And then there's the movie, remember the movie Hangar 18?
Yes, I do remember.
Oh, classic. I recently saw it, I think last year. It's like, not sure it holds up, but it's fun for nostalgic purposes. And of course, I always love Darren McGavin in anything.
Yes.
But anyway, there's a Hangar 18, and we're talking Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. This thread claims unnamed witnesses saw the wreckage being transported out of state to Wright-Patterson, or Wright-Pat, the famous facility in UFO lore, again, as the home of, allegedly, of Hangar 18, where the government supposedly keeps, or at one time kept, recovered alien material, which we're going to get back to here in a minute. But again, I think can't remember if I said this before, but remember there was also the anytime you do something big like that, especially with construction, you got to hire people. I always wonder about the James Spectre, the James Bond villains. Well, that's so secretive. Like, you got to hire your own people to do that. But who built the facility in the middle of that crater?
Right.
Who made all this stuff? Where did they get the computer components? Well, if you're that criminal, you got to do it yourself.
Yeah.
Or you hire people to do it. But it's like at Wright Pat. Remember people during the whole Nazi Bell, Die Glocke, they said like, we saw shipments of flatbed trucks coming in carrying ceramic bricks, which there would be no need for unless you were doing something that put out a tremendous amount of heat or maybe even radiation. So people see stuff coming in and out, and then they wonder.
Well, and that's an important point here too, because when you're talking about these trucks with objects going through on tarps, and which I do believe happened in Kecksburg because of the witness stories, I think there's no question to me that something left Kecksburg on a flatbed truck with a tarp over it, and it's not just because Robert Stack said so, but it's like, but a little bit it is. But in this case, though, one of the things with a lot of these theories where something had to happen under the cover of night, whether it was loading cutting the plane up and putting it on a train, or this idea of this truck coming and get stuff. This was a very thriving, vibrant, working 24/7 community. It didn't sleep. This was the, New York's the city that never sleeps. Pittsburgh was the steel city that never stopped making steel. All night long, all day long, people are coming and going to work. I do believe, especially as close, if you look on Google Earth or Google Maps and at the spot in the river that we're talking about here, just look up Beck's Run Road. That points right to where they think the plane essentially sank.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on there, and you're right at Pittsburgh. So there's a lot of activity. So I still feel like this would be a hard thing to hide.
Perhaps. Yeah. No, it's a good point. Here's one of the more prominent claims.
Okay.
Nuclear. Either some kind of an atomic bomb or nuclear materials transported from Nevada.
Okay.
And for you folks out there, don't say Nevada. They don't care for that.
Yeah.
Or Oregon.
Yeah.
Nevada. So the geographic logic here is that Nellis Air Force Base is adjacent to the Nevada test site
Yeah.
where the United States conducted atmospheric nuclear testing throughout the 1950s.
Yeah.
So the plane originated near where the nuclear program lived or was operating. And from there, the speculation runs that the plane was carrying nuclear material east to Olmsted, AFB, or Andrews, or wherever, and the crash exposed something that had to be retrieved before the public got close to it for safety and bad PR.
So the thing about this, and I didn't really understand this, honestly, I don't have the military expertise to understand this, but until we started digging into this and the research on it and what people thought about those particular theories is there's an operational problem with it.
Yeah.
In 1956, the Air Force already had specific aircraft and specific protocols for nuclear weapons transport. They wouldn't have put weapons-grade material in a 20-year-old converted bomber being flown by parts pickup crews to retrieve aircraft components, from Pennsylvania. It just doesn't make sense. This TB-25N was an obsolete Navigator trainer scheduled to be scrapped within a year and a half. It wasn't equipped for nuclear handling. It wasn't operationally appropriate for that kind of mission. And the flight plan, Nellis to Tinker to Selfridge to Olmsted to Andrews, was actually a routine logistics route. None of those waypoints are nuclear facilities.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. I agree with that. I will, that makes sense to me. But I will say this for those, especially, anybody that's been in the military currently, but I can speak for like my grandfather and father. It's like the military does a lot of things that don't make sense. To regular people. Look, they've had 200 years to get things right, to work on stuff. But yeah, they do things that they test out a lot of stuff. And it's like, as my grandfather said, well, if it didn't work, guys died. Well, we don't do that again.
Right.
But to them, it's like, well, let's try this. So that's possibility. But some things, just like don't work out, especially when it comes to transportation.
Yeah, but I feel like if they had, let's say they were doing it and it was a cover story or something like that, I feel like they would have picked more reliable equipment at the very least. Even if the plane, even if the exterior of the plane is like it's a sleeper. It looks like a plane that's about to be junked, but on the inside it's brand new Rolls-Royce engines and whatever. It should be pretty if you're carrying something that dangerous. I mean, of course, there's plenty of broken arrow stories. There's even one in here in North Carolina, I think, where they never even found the bomb. I'm pretty sure it's in a swamp.
There's something right. There's a few stories out there like that. Or the time that guy he dropped it was like a 3-foot ratchet in a missile silo, almost igniting a nuclear explosion. So accidents do happen. Things you're doing too many complicated and dangerous things all at once with too many people and rushing around usually. So things will happen. But maybe that's a perfect cover. Like you said, I've always wanted a car like that where it looks really junky in the outside, so nobody wants to
sleeper
break into it, but it's very luxurious. Also, a house like that in not so much war games and Whopper. Remember the house at the the miso silo just looks like a plain old grandma house, and then you travel down several stories into something else.
Indeed.
All right. So anyway, yes, perfect cover. More likely to me that it would have happened that way, but still, look, I think at that point, the plane, they would use something. You're right that you wouldn't risk something with that would be unreliable and an older piece of junk, even though it's been checked out. Because now you got a bigger problem in your hands with more money and more time and more exposure. So I agree with that. So anyway, that all tracks for me. What you said. The next claim here is chemical or biological, and now we're talking about nerve gas or biological weapons. Robert Gorman, a researcher in New Kensington, Pennsylvania, has spent years on a website dedicated to this case, and he made the argument in this way, quote, "It wasn't a briefcase they could have sent a diver down to get. It was too bulky. Sometimes I lean toward nerve gas, but do I really know? No." End quote. Gorman's framing is interesting here because he reasons backward from the alleged cover-up, that if there was a cover-up, what would justify one, and lands on chemical weapons as the cargo that would be too dangerous to just leave in the water.
Yeah, and there's a version of this theory that adds an urgency argument, but like if nerve gas or biological material had been on the plane, it was left in the river, it could have eventually leaked, contaminated Pittsburgh's water supply. So that's the cover-up motive. The military had to recover it because the alternative was like a serious problem, maybe even a mass casualty event. On the other hand, the river was borderline nerve gas already with the pollution.
I was going to say
probably not
yeah.
biological would be a different thing, but like
Yeah.
I don't even know if a biological weapon could survive in those conditions.
Yeah.
So that's when it comes around to my theory here. It's like, well, if there's biological something in this aircraft and it goes down in that river that's so polluted that it eats metal, I don't think that would have necessarily amounted to much. But I don't know. I just don't, for me, and I'll get to it here in my theories here in a minute, but like it's just hard for me to imagine that there was a very high value cargo on board this aircraft. I don't think that's part of what happened. But in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
I probably would go with that. But to your point, though, it's difficult to pull off. That's why I asked you if it was real anthrax. I remember this one.
Did you look it up? Because I can't even remember now. Let me see.
Well, that I didn't look up. What I was going to say is that if you folks remember, there was a nerve agent attack on the subway in Tokyo in March 20th, 1995, where these cult members released liquid form of sarin, which is a very potent nerve agent, on 3 of the metro lines in Tokyo during morning rush hour, and it actually killed 14 people and caused problems for about 1,000 others. And then it sickened over 6,000 commuters. I know those trains are packed, but yeah.
Yeah, but that's nerve gas, which I guess the nerve gas is more dangerous than a biological agent. I have no idea what I'm talking about, but I did just see that what Tom Brokaw got or what was sent to him was real. So that was
real.
in the
Okay,
building.
that's right. And so it's possible that stuff's floating around, and then people panicking. I remember this one, this poor lady. She had called the FBI because I think that the husband came home from work and then like the lawn was like full of FBI agents because she thought somebody had spread anthrax all over her lawn, and it turned out to be flower fertilizer. And like, you really think just you without any? You're not Tom Brokaw. But somebody decided to pick your house. But I can see the level of panic in people.
Yeah.
Like just
there was so much happening. It's scary.
Right.
And then, like I said, you were just every time you turned on the news or listened to 1010 Wins or whatever, they were telling you about all the different things that were probably going to happen to you while you were commuting to work.
I know. It's just there's a lot of fear mongering that goes along with that,
which is the origin of the word terrorism, I guess.
Oh well, there you go. It's meant to have that effect. But to your point here about the nerve agent business here, the skeptical response here would probably be same or similar to what Aldrich made about the secret recovery question.
Yes.
And Aldrich, meaning one of the recovery group specialists here, was talking about this secret recovery proposition or theory. The variant of the B-25, the TB-25N, that wasn't any kind of a chemical weapons platform as much as it was for a nuclear platform for transportation here. The Air Force in 1956 had specific protocols and a specific aircraft for that kind of cargo too, as you would imagine.
Right.
Something that would survive a crash and not break open and spread it all around.
Right.
And then the crew of this flight included passengers that were going to go home to Washington, D.C., not a hazardous cargo containment team, right? So the passengers don't make sense for that.
Yeah.
And then the 70 years of monitoring Pittsburgh water supply doesn't show any anomalous contamination.
Right.
With anything concerning submerged chemical containers. So that's not there either.
Yeah. And so then there are still other, I guess, local folklore, lighter cargo theories, mafia money, loads of cash being moved across the country for organized crime, again, coming out of Vegas. State-of-the-art communications equipment that needed to stay classified, maybe.
That's possible, sure.
Yeah. It's less dramatic, but these have the same fundamental problem. It's a routine parts pickup flight, probably. It's just doesn't seem like that kind of stuff would be sneaking around in this old plane. But who knows? Like you said, they don't always make the most rational decisions in the military.
No, but they not to throw any shade. That's just that is the
yes,
is the attitude. Well, things can go wrong pretty quickly. Like I said, my friend who was a childhood friend who was stationed aboard several carriers, like the Enterprise, USS America, he said a lot of times on the flight deck, like there's an accident that almost happened. That would have been quite terrible if somebody didn't catch it in time, or just by sheer luck, something dangerous didn't happen. But no, they know about this stuff, especially the kind of transport of these serious materials where the public is concerned as well. So, okay, well, put that under your tinfoil hat. And then the last wild theory we have is about who was on the plane that wasn't supposed to be on that plane. And the most persistent version of this conspiracy is the seventh man. Some local eyewitnesses claim that a mysterious seventh passenger emerged from the sinking aircraft wearing a military uniform with all the insignia stripped off. Now it's starting to sound again like Amelia Earhart, which again, remember if you're talking about Thomas E. Devine.
Oh, Thomas Devine, yeah.
That's right. He wrote the Amelia Earhart incident as an eyewitness. He was on Saipan in the post office there, the communications section there, and he claims that he saw people flying her plane, military people,
right.
take it out of the hangar. That's a fascinating whole how that fits together with three guys that didn't really know each other.
Yeah.
Neighbors, Wallach and Thomas E. Devine.
Yeah.
And he said they flew it around, landed it, then doused it with gas, strafed it, and cut the pieces up and disposed of them. So again, it's like somebody may know something out there about that. But here we're talking about a mysterious seventh person. This guy has got all the uniform, but no scrambled eggs on his cap bill.
Right.
No insignia. Boy, does that come up a lot. Also with Amelia Earhart. Remember, Wallach was the other guy who blew open the safe and claims to have found Amelia's flight case.
Yes.
And he handed it over, and it was picked up by two guys, officers, but had no insignia from the Navy.
Right.
So there you go.
Kind of like Colonel
but anyway,
Flagg on MASH.
That's right, the CIA officer. Well, a bit OSS maybe. Yeah. Anyway, this implication is being that this was someone who wasn't part of the official manifest, which I also believe happens.
Yeah.
And then from there, the theory branches out. The most popular branch of this theory here is defecting Soviet spy. Also quite possible.
Yeah.
There is even a piece of local lore noted in a Pittsburgh Post-Gazette local history video, which claims that the alleged defector was later interviewed on television while wearing a hood to disguise his identity.
Ooh, that's pretty juicy. Also, though, that could have just been the unknown comic. But we should be clear.
That would have been a grocery bag,
Yeah, that was a grocery bag. We should be clear about how the Post-Gazette handled it, though. They documented that the rumor circulated. They weren't
right.
They weren't asserting that the hooded interview happened.
No.
They were noting that it's out there. It's in the lore. So
right, exactly. So yes, the Air Force record is pretty clean on this manifest here.
Right.
6 men were on the fatal leg of that flight. Captain Tabak got off at Selfridge before the leg, that flight leg crashed. 2 died, and then 4 survived. The survivors went to Montefiore and McGee hospitals and were then interviewed by the press the next morning. None of them had mentioned an extra passenger, but if he was secret, why would they?
Yeah.
The hospital records, the police records, the river rescue accounts, none of them had a 7th person. But then again, if you're of a mind of us to entertain way-out stuff, it could have been very secret or supernatural. I'll just put it out there.
Yeah, this would all make a great movie. And so would this, the Vegas Showgirls.
Oh, yes, let's not forget them. Life of a Showgirl here on a B-25. Now, this claim is that the plane was being used to fly or ferry Las Vegas showgirls across the country to entertain senators and congressmen in Washington, D.C.
I'm sure that's never happened.
Now, the geographic logic actually has more legs than most, right? So this flight plan here, the flight plan, it did end at Andrews Air Force Base just outside of Washington, D.C. So the route would be consistent with a Vegas to D.C. transport.
Yeah, so that makes sense. It's Vegas to D.C., which is also, though, but that's why they're putting everything. They're putting showgirls on the plane. They're putting mafia money because it's Vegas. They're putting nuclear because it's Vegas. All of that stuff is happening out that way, but... the main problem here is the same for all the other ones. The plane is a converted trainer. You couldn't fit a chorus line in it, even if you wanted to, especially with 6 other passengers. So it just doesn't seem plausible to me.
Well,
these stories are fun though. This is my favorite thing about folklore.
Yeah, that is
a lot of fun stories here.
Aside from the people perishing, it's
well, yeah, of course, yeah.
I know.
I don't. God, now you're making me feel horrible. Yeah.
No, not at all. No, what I'm look,
and I should. By the way, I'm not saying you shouldn't.
No, the deal is you want to know what really happened, and I'm sure the families and descendants of the air crew also want to know what exactly happened. And as we're getting towards the end here, there's not many solid answers.
Yeah.
For something so concrete in a way, that's what makes a great mystery. Is that this shouldn't be that unsolvable.
No, it shouldn't be like,
and
where did this plane go? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
And so, you
no matter what was on it, where is the plane? Like, forget all of this stuff that's on it. where did the plane go?
The Mull Air mystery, it's like, okay, plane, guy falls out. How is he in that condition? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it's a making of a great mystery. It's like everything seems mundane up until a certain point
Right.
where it's just really not mundane anymore. Like I said,
Right.
but it should be. And so you have a lot of players, especially around this time, finally getting to one character most folks know, Howard Hughes.
Yes.
Now, this theory exists. There's two versions of this theory here. The first one is that Hughes's stuff was on the plane. Now we're talking about classified aviation technology, whatever he was doing with the military. And
Yeah.
I figured that there was some stuff like that, kind of like with Tesla.
Yeah.
Where did his 18 trunks of information go after he
Right.
died in the hotel?
Yeah.
Somebody came by and scooped
All
those
about
up.
free energy for everybody.
Yeah, so kind of suspicious. That's another one we should dig into one day.
Yes. Yes.
But we're also talking about could be money, cash, something else that was related to Howard Hughes. And the second branch of this theory is that it was actually Howard Hughes himself that was on board secretly.
Ooh,
Maybe the
yeah.
seventh man. I don't know.
I read his biography many years ago. One of
Oh, he did?
Yeah, with the crazy long it was really, really fascinating.
Mm.
Hi, this is Sander Bergwerf from the city of 's-Hertogenbosch. When I'm not practicing the pronunciation of my last name and the name of the city I live in, I'm listening to Astonishing Legends. Now, let's get back to the show.
I feel like in this case, the passenger version is probably the easiest one to dismiss because
Yeah,
in 56, he was one of the most famous people in the world in one of the most photographed periods of his life, even when he was trying to hide. He owned RKO Pictures. He was running Hughes Aircraft. Everything he did made the news. The idea that he was on this military flight that crashed and then nobody saw him after the plane crash, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Plus, he's a pilot and with lots of planes.
Right.
He can fly anywhere he wants. He doesn't need to hitch a ride, so it doesn't.
Yeah, that one's a little bit thin, but fun, as you were saying. So, okay.
Yeah.
And then the cargo version has the same, I guess you could call them structural problems that the other theories have.
Yeah.
Hughes Aircraft was a defense contractor with its own logistics, right? Like
Right.
we were saying here. They just wouldn't put sensitive materials on a plane unless it's a massive cover-up of something else, and he was involved with aliens. I don't know.
Right.
You have to go even more fantastical to make that one, that square peg fit in the round hole for me.
Well, so that sums up those. None of those can we go really deep on because there's not a lot on any of them. It's all basically local oral history and folklore. There are some compelling degrees to some of it, but it does feel, again, none of it like has much teeth to it, I don't think. But it doesn't change the fact that it's super strange that the plane is missing. So we've talked about the midnight removal, the dangerous cargo, ETs, NHIs, mysterious passengers. There are probably dozens of conspiracy threads that if you look at this. So now let's move forward to 1995, backward from now, but from 56 forward. 40 years after the splashdown, 4 people started the B-25 Recovery Group, which is composed with the late John Aldrich, which Forrest mentioned a few minutes ago. Also Bob Shima, Steve Byers, and Matt Punzak. They've been working on the case for 30 years. They've been pursuing this.
Yeah, and this is where John Aldrich of the B-25 Recovery Group landed after decades of trying to verify the story here. He says not credible.
Right.
Not because Aldrich was a skeptic per se. He spent the last 30 years of his life trying to find this airplane. The recovery group had its own quarrel with how the official search was conducted. That's interesting here.
Yeah.
He felt like all those stories, the family stories, those late night calls into the radio station, the unnamed witnesses, the documentary silences across 70 years really doesn't add up to evidence.
Right.
So here's the big question, Scott. Where do they think the plane is now?
The B-25 Recovery Group thinks the plane is at a place called Bird's Landing, mile marker 4.9 on the Mon, left descending bank across from the former J&L Mill. The working hypothesis is after the Forsythia lost it, if that is what it hooked those times, was that the plane drifted along the bottom and settled into the gravel pit the tug Redstone identified in February of 56. That 47-foot hole that you were talking about earlier. Punzak told the Associated Press in 1996, quote, "There's a mystery here. It's a challenge, end quote. They've suggested that the plane is sitting under 10 to 15 feet of silt and 32 feet of water, about 150 feet from shore.
Wow. But at that point, in 30 years of trying, every search has come up empty so far.
Yeah, Bob Shima has been consistent for 30 years on this investigation, and his position is the aircraft simply ran out of gas. That's what he's been quoted saying that. And that's the recovery group's whole position, too. The plane's in the pit, the river ate the skin, and you need sub-bottom profiling sonar, the kind that sends low-frequency pulses through the sediment, to see it.
Right.
Side scan from the surface can't penetrate the silt. They estimated the budget back in 1999 for something like this at $25,000, and they just never got that kind of funding to do that. So these guys are volunteers. So
it's like a Earhart's plane or a Buka. It's just like it all takes a lot of money and some real drive to go do this.
Yeah, exactly.
By sponsors and then knowledgeable people. It's not just the will to do this in an organization. So there's a lot that goes into this to make it happen. And sadly, these things will just sit as mysteries. But it'd be cool in the future if there was some other technology that could do that. Cheaper and easier. So again, Andy Masich, the same 2023 City Paper interview here, said it pretty plainly, quote, "We know where every Ford pickup truck, barge, and shopping cart is down there, but we don't know where that plane is."
All right. So it comes down to us here at this point. What do we think happened?
Right. Well, I'm not sure there's much to for me to expose. It's just, like I said, there's a lot of kind of dead ends and kind of thin.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, but still a pretty intriguing mystery here. But based on aviation mysteries we've all covered in the past, like Amelia, we've been talking about, we can tell you that sometimes the thing you're looking for has been right there all along. It's been reduced next to nothing by nature. As I always say, the earth swallows all eventually.
Yeah.
And it just buries everything in its wake here. And then maybe in this case, pollution created by people had an effect on it. And if you don't look in the exact right place for something minute, you may never find it. That's the thing with all treasure. We talked about this with Butch Cassidy and stuff. It's like you bury something, you know exactly where it is. You made a map, you've lined up site points, you come back later and it's nearly impossible to find.
Yeah.
Even like where Patty the Bigfoot was trudging along. It took a long time for people to find that exact spot.
And when I started this show, I remember thinking, just know what, if you brought this story to me and we covered it early on in the early years when we started the show, I would have thought, well, there's just no way. Something is very, very fishy. Since then, we have been exposed to so many aviation mysteries and other kinds of things that I'm a little more, I think, realistic about this kind of stuff. And I think this is, what you were just talking about is closest to what happened. I think maybe the airframe got into that gravel pit or whatever, or somewhere just like it in the first day or two after the splashdown. Right. This occurred to me too. What if the Forsythia actually did have a hold of it on February 1st in 56? And then the anchor, it caught it and actually dragged it into that hole or or plowed it under while it was trying to drag it out.
Possibly.
And so then once it kind of nosed down or got into a hole or something, then all the bad chemicals in the Mon started going to work on the aluminum, acid mine drainage, mill runoff, all that stuff. And then maybe by 1995, 30 years later, when the recovery group first put the sonar into that stretch, what they were looking for probably already would have had a very different shape or be too small for them to identify it as a target. So, now by the time you look at last year, what's down there, it could just be like the engines, the landing gear, because that stuff is steel. That's not aluminum.
Yeah.
Everything else could just be silt or degraded or gone. So it's like at this point, your targets are infinitely smaller than originally what you were searching for, maybe. I don't know. Or, or the whole thing's intact under some soft silt. Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah.
Some shot of them bringing it out. You know who they need to get is that guy, that volunteer dude that is finding all of the missing people in their cars and waterways off the roads of North America.
Oh, yeah, that team.
Volunteer diving team. Yeah, those folks.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's somewhere, but it's just not where people thought it was. And
but now we have LiDAR and all this tech. I feel like, but it all takes money, And
Yeah,
so
that's true.
somebody's
That's
got
what I
to
was
invest
saying.
in it
Yeah.
and take the time to go deal with it. And I'm sure it's still a very busy area even today in terms of river traffic and that sort of thing. So it's really tricky business.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's less of a mystery in that, there's no famous people associated with it like Amelia Earhart or
Right.
somebody else where you want to know, but it's like, and it's different than like Flight 19 and just
Yeah.
that one very quickly got weird
Yeah.
and then stayed weird. And
Right.
so, where's that? And then like, just like I said, what gets added to it, not so much with this case, but like with Flight 19. Remember I think his name was George. One of the pilots, somebody claimed that he showed up later, delivered a telegram to
That's right.
a family, or somebody delivered a
Years
telegram
later,
supposedly
signed
from
with
him.
his family nickname that people
Yeah.
didn't know. Yeah.
Right. So that's the weird keeps on going, and some people believe that those planes are somewhere intact.
I thought you were going to say in time, somewhere in time.
And they might be somewhere in time as
I'll see you in
time being a
time.
perspective.
Yeah.
Like I said, they're in another place. In this one, I don't know. I mean, are you you're not really going to the exotic ideas, and I get why. Because
Yeah, it's just they're kind of thin.
thinner.
I would love to pick a stranger. I love strange endings. We've done
Yep.
plenty of episodes where the strange ending I felt like turns out to be right, but that doesn't
Yep.
feel like this one to me. The strange version of this case, secret recovery, exotic cargo, seventh man. It's just hard to
Yeah.
imagine that stuff based on the other circumstances and just complete
Right.
lack of any additional proof. And also Aldrich, who's since passed away, but he did the work on that. And I think when I greatly respect a researcher who's focused on one thing like this for decades, and that whole team, the B-25 recovery group.
Yeah.
If they have an opinion, I think it carries a lot of weight because they ostensibly they know more about it than anybody,
Right.
especially when it's been this long since it happened.
Right. So what are your thoughts though about the fuel gauge anomaly here, or just the mismanagement or misconception on that?
So the official story is the gauges were wrong and the plane ran out of gas. And the pencil math we talked about earlier said that somebody on the investigation side couldn't quite get the numbers to reconcile with the normal fuel burn for that distance in those conditions. And we noted that Commander Roddy from the nearby Air Force Base said gauge singular, but there were 4 of them. So whatever, maybe that's not a big deal. Like you said, maybe that's a misspeak. But my question is, what if the fuel didn't disappear? What if it was in the tanks, but it couldn't get to the engines? Like maybe fuel pressure problems, maybe the lines were fouled, the engine starved. The plane's going to come down. It's going to be the same thing as if it ran out of gas, even if it had it. But and then the engines quit because they're not getting the gas, even if it's on board. But the problem is this doesn't really work either because supposedly they said they could see from the gauges that it was draining super fast or too quickly. So I guess that doesn't make sense. Yeah, I don't know. So that would imply some kind of leak, but they also said they couldn't see a leak. And would that drain all 4 tanks? I don't really know how B-25 works, but I feel like there'd be some isolation there for redundancy between the tanks, especially in something that was originally designed for combat. So that doesn't make sense either. I got to think about the fuel pressure indicators too, because the B-25 had 2 of those, 1 per engine. If pressure was dropping, you'd think at least one of those would have caught it before the engines quit. And if both of those indicators failed at the same time or both got missed, that's its own anomaly that doesn't make sense, especially with, I think, 3 people who were pilots on board. It doesn't make sense that they would have not noticed that. So I don't know where I'm at. Honestly, I think there's more than just the gauges were just wrong going on.
Yeah.
And
Gotcha.
like I feel like maybe the plane came down with the gas. We don't know that because we don't have the plane. It could be if they had recovered it at the time, they might have been like, oh, the tanks were full, the lines were clogged, and the engines failed for some other reason. And maybe it just looked like they were draining too fast because the plane, it's a bumpy ride. The needles were bouncing around. I don't know. Anyway, so my thought is that I think that it went down there and I think it's still there. And I think there's very little of it left. And I think it's entirely possible we may never know what happened to that aircraft. But I guess the biggest part of the mystery to me is simply why did it stop operating? What brought it down?
Well, at this time and point in history, this mystery is still preserved, whether that's under a lot of silt in a river or on a spaceship in an alien museum. Who knows? But it's preserved for right now. It's just kind of frozen wherever it's at. And the recovery group, they're still working on it.
Yeah.
Sub-bottom profiling sonar, they might find the engines. Like I was saying, maybe there's some technology in the future, 10 years from now, whenever, we might get a better answer. Again, you have to have the will and the money to apply that technology to this mystery.
Yeah.
But maybe they find it with some new technology here. Or maybe nothing ever surfaces. The river just takes the plane, like the sea takes all, and never gives up its dead, rarely.
Yeah.
And the plane just stays where the river put it.
Yeah.
Either way, the men who got on that B-25, bureau number 44-29125, are part of the documented record here. 6 men boarded at Selfridge. Only 4 came home walking. 2 came home months later. And the plane never did. And that's the case. That's where we are 70 years on. And one thing that's interesting is that the B-25 recovery group has since christened the plane the Linda Rose. So maybe moving forward, this will be the mystery of the Linda Rose. I don't know. With any luck, maybe we'll see her again. It'll be, I would love for it to be totally restored in some way. I just love restoration of old pieces of equipment like that in history. Or, on the other hand, maybe she's already been hauled off to some clandestine location. My final thought on this is that either it is strange but mundane. I don't see how chemicals in a river would eat something away that fast.
Yeah.
But again, it's not like it was in a
Well,
in a
I don't.
massive
By the
vat.
way, I was not pitching that it was eaten up in 2 days. I'd never pitched.
No. I know. And I don't want people listening to that to think that it was that fast.
No.
But then again, like that giant plane, it wasn't in a swimming pool filled with perchloric acid, you know what I'm saying, where it just ate it up overnight or in a couple of days.
Yeah.
But maybe over time, it has deteriorated enough that it is unrecognizable and unsearchable in a way.
Right.
Although, like you said, some pieces may still remain, and maybe that gets solved one day. So my final thoughts are that it was something as a strange set of circumstances in how it went down, but still unknown to even the survivors and the investigators. So it was a weird and unfortunate set of circumstances that caused that plane to ditch. It was another set of strange hydrodynamic circumstances that caused the plane to be unfindable or hidden. And just that's just the way that the river in that particular spot, quite circumstantially and coincidentally, just happened to disappear that plane. Or, I'm leaving this door open, that's something very anomalous and very strange. You could even say paranormal, but none of the theories we talked about. That's my caveat, is that it's something else that is otherworldly, but none of the prevailing theories about that we mentioned. It's something else really weird that happened. And I'm not even talking about something extraterrestrial, let's say, or off-world or interdimensional. It could be something like electronic fog, which I love that example, because here's something that is just, it's environmental, but extremely rare, but really weird, and we can't explain it, but it does occasionally happen.
Ooh, I like that one.
Yeah, and until we find out the answers, we are, as I sometimes say, just going to have to live with the mystery.
That's going to wrap up episode 331 of Astonishing Legends. Keep an ear out for new episodes of the Dead Letter Office weekly on Tuesdays. If you join us at patreon.com/astonishinglegends, you can hear all of this content early and commercial free. If that's not your thing, remember that all of our shows are free to listen to right here on our main feed. Help us out by telling your friends and family about us, and please remember to support our sponsors when you can.
Astonishing Legends is edited by Sarah Voorhees-Wendell at VW Sound. Our co-producer is Tess Feifel, who also leads our research efforts and manages our social media. And we're grateful for the hard work of our technical producer, Ed Vicola, behind the scenes. Special thanks to our announcer, John Boland, for lending his voice to our shows.
Hi, I'm Marco Acevedo.
And my name is spelled S as in Sam.
V-A-L.
This is Sandy H. Crane.
BERGWERFF.
Galaxy-wide in perpetuity.
Our theme, which is available as a ringtone, was composed by Judson Crane at foundermusic.com. All other music and sound design for the show is composed and created by Alan Caressia.
Our logo was created by Tommy Beaver Design. And our animated graphics for social media and YouTube are done by Joshua Sloan at deadstreetproductions.com.
Many episodes have transcripts available. For ones that don't, you can request them by emailing transcripts@astonishinglegends.com.
Astonishing Legends would not be possible without you, our listeners. Visit our store at astonishinglegends.com or interact with us and other listeners on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Discord, and YouTube.
You can also visit us at patreon.com/astonishinglegends, where patrons have access to commercial-free versions of both the main show and the Dead Letter Office, as well as additional bonus content, including the Patreon-exclusive show, The Astonishing Junk Drawer. No part of this show may be reproduced anywhere without permission. Copyright Astonishing Legends Productions.
Good night.